Hello and welcome again to Indiepocalypse Radio. We're closing in on the end of the year. Would you believe it? 2023 is at a close. I think I had something else to say. Oh, I know what I had something else to say, and it was because this thing's been driving me nuts. So there's like, I'm gonna ask the guest about this in a second, but I don't know if he'll have a proper answer. But there are like these. It's one of these things I need to get out of my brain. But there are inflatable like Christmas stuff all over the place now. There's been a thing in recent years of those giant inflatable lawn ornaments, and there's a Grinch one, classic. Green guy hates Christmas, lives on a big mountain with a dog, um, but because of like the coloring of the sheet and and I assume the light that people are using, like those kind of classic yellow glow lights from a distance and even like up close because the Grinch's smile, I think, adds like another layer of cloth to his mouth area. It just looks like a bunch of Homer Simpsons, and it freaked me out. And I don't know if that is a universal experience or not, but it is a universal experience here on Indie Apocalypse Radio. I think that's video games and music. And we have our guest here. We're flying solo bolo style today. Hey, it's harder to schedule around the end of the year often. It just kind of happens. But we are here.
Do I say him?
Yes, hello. Luis Hernandez, you may know
Oh,
from
hi.
is it Escote or Escote? I have that on here. I
Escote.
Escote. I played a little on the. You heard, if you were here in the pre-show, there was a track on the top and jazz punk. It's Luis Hernandez. Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Um, Kind of groggy, but otherwise got all my limbs and appendages and everything is intact. So
That's an important thing to have all of those. Generally,
yeah, need all my digits.
they're very helpful. Like I feel like if you're losing out on one, there's an important thing. You're like, oh wait a minute, I really needed that guy. Uh, okay, I was like, I'm closing all of my social medias. Done with them. I've made my live
500.
posts and I've exiled them. I
Your 500 Chrome tabs are all
Yes.
getting collapsed.
Well, actually, I switched to Firefox, and that's what finally killed all of my social media tabs because I had to like rebuild them, and I was like, just what if I didn't? What if I did
Oh,
not repin
weird.
all these sites and just left them closed? And
You'd have some memory left on your computer. That'd be the first thing.
it is, and I'm like living my best life now. But I had when I signed into Instagram, it was like a bunch of people want to follow you on Threads, so I made a Threads account. Uh, it's truly the most deranged site. I do not wish to visit it. It
What's
is.
Threads?
It's truly the worst of them.
Is it clothing
No,
uh,
it's like
based?
Instagram. It's like Twitter, but made by Meta.
Oh, that thing. I've never
Yes.
actually clicked on. I think it's tried to get me to join it many times, and I've just brushed it away. Um,
Wise.
yeah, I've just pushed it away. Yeah, I've just pushed it. It's like, do you want to join? All your friends are on Thread,
Yeah.
and I just kind of like mush it away with my hand every time.
I. That was a smart thing to do. I I clicked
Yeah.
on it. Like, what's this? It's like one post from someone I know. Then the most deranged posts of like people who are like so social media brained. I can't handle it. But I also
Is it ostensibly is it a TikTok clone? Is that basically what it's gunning for?
no. It's gunning for a Twitter clone. Uh,
Oh.
because it's all
Oh, okay. I
yeah.
assumed it was TikTok-y.
No, Instagram's trying to do that because with
Oh,
their reels and everything, it's
I
trying.
see.
But I also TikTok is also its whole other beast that I have no interest in because I'm not posting video of myself on the internet.
Yeah, I'm too old. Every time I look at it, I feel like Alec Baldwin in Beetlejuice or something, where you just like age, but 100 years in a minute.
Yeah,
Uh,
and every time I've seen people like it's good for advertising. Whenever I've seen someone advertising, uh, they're on TikTok. They're like, it's like I can't talk like this. This doesn't feel like how a human being is meant to talk. And
yeah, it's pretty foreign to me. it's pretty alien. At some point, I will have to hire a young person to be on TikTok for me for, the next time I'm like in a game, whatever promotional cycle.
Right.
Uh, I understand its utility as a platform,
Yeah.
but I can't operate that machine. Like I don't have a license to operate that particular piece of heavy machinery.
That's fine.
I
That's
gotta get.
the whole shop floor doesn't have to be forklift certified. Find
Yeah, yeah. I'm
find
gonna
your
farm that job out to someone else.
find your guy. Uh, Speaking of, I guess, uh, game promotional cycles. If people weren't familiar with jazz punk, how would you describe jazz punk?
Oh, I used to be really good at this.
Yeah,
Um,
like reach
had
reach
I
into
had
the
a
recesses of your brain. There's a lot of lights going on. There's like some loud game
oh
next to
man.
you. Some press guy just walked up. He's like, "Hey, what's this thing? What's going on here?"
Oh yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I had this down pretty well. Like I had a muscle for this.
Your patter.
Um, yeah, I had a whole patter for like when I'm at PAX or whatever. I think I used to describe it as a sort of a retro futuristic comedy adventure thing. I mean, it is an adventure game.
Yeah, if
It
you
is
if you
it is
break.
a comedy.
Yeah, it's
Um,
it is. I don't know. It's a jazz punk like. Um,
did you ever play it?
I did a long time ago. It was
Okay.
now that I'm reaching out to other guests outside of the sphere of Indiepocalypse, I'm running into the space of inviting guests onto the show whose work I really like, and I go, "How do you say? I love that thing a lot." um, I loved the jazz punk a lot. Just played it when it came out, and I was like, "Oh man, why don't people make video games like this?" And then
Because
they
they're
still don't
really
really.
they don't really. No, it's so one of the weird design decisions, and I wouldn't call it a constraint, or maybe it's I don't know if it's a type of constraint. One of the rules that we had when we were working on it, it's just me and my buddy Jess uh, made it. But one of the rules that we had was like I don't like how much games are about repeating or just about repetition,
Yeah,
both in terms of their gameplay, but also in terms of how the environments are built. Um, and so I get just as bored with a game where like the same texture just keeps repeating on the wall. Um, whatever, whether it's Doom or something where you can go through tons of Doom maps and it's the same, sort of greebly sci-fi wall texture and the same tiled floor. Um, and so that texture just keeps repeating and the music keeps repeating. Um, and then the same is true with the gameplay where, you play a game and sometimes it can be an 80-hour RPG or it can be a 20-hour shooter, but like the gameplay doesn't really mutate much
right.
during the experience. So a lot of a lot of the rules to making jazz punk was really just about not repeating things, whether it's the way the levels are built or the way you interact with the world. Like it keeps shuffling, and we would try to do something new every time you go to do something, or every time you go somewhere. I wanted to make like a very different place or a place that felt really new. So it's really inefficient. It's a
Yes.
really, really inefficient game to make. That's what I was getting to. It's a incredibly inefficient, and it's almost by design inefficient to
Right.
make. Um, and as a result, it's been almost 10 years now, and I haven't seen. It's very rare I see another game that's built that way, just because every single producer, who anyone in charge would always look at it and be like, "What do you don't? What are you doing?
Yeah. Right.
You
Right.
can't. What are you
Only
insane? Like,
only in like the kind of like hyper indie space, which I'm thinking of starting to call it non-studio. That's the thing I've kind of flipped on. My brain is gravitated towards now. I was calling games. I was calling them budgeted games. Like what if I just call them studio games? Makes more sense. Like studio versus indie. Uh, this is my 5-year quest of finding
A
coining
definition
buzzwords.
for yeah. Studio games and non-studio games is kind of an interesting, uh, uh, a kind of an interesting descriptor. Um, I think we all come up against that problem of trying to.
Yeah.
You're like, where is the line in the sand? Because we're all frustrated with it, right? We're like, that's not an indie game, and you know that, and I know that,
Yeah.
but it's not always an easy thing um to quantify
Right. And I've seen
into a perfect definition.
I've seen the sentiment a couple times that like, oh, indie games, they've changed so much in 10 years, but they like, as someone who's been in the deep shit of it, they haven't really like all the innovative whatever indie games you're pining for that used to exist still exist, but like, people have purchased the term indie nowadays, so it's like it's been like purchased by other people who use it differently, like. I mean, if you think 10,
Yeah,
15 years ago, you weren't finding new indie
yeah.
games on like the Game Awards. You were like going to the TIG Source forums or whatever.
Oh shit, I forgot about TIG Source.
And then if you like still go to TIG Source, and if you wanted to find those games, you just go back to those places still.
Is TIG Source still going strong?
I don't know if it's
It's still
still
around.
going strong, but I'm pretty sure it's still up.
It better
I
be
don't know
up.
how strong it is, but like
I know the I in TIG Source is probably. I know the I and the G are is indie games. I'm assuming. What's the T in
probably the.
TIG? Oh, the indie games.
Is this the one I'm thinking
Huh.
of? Well, I mean, I was mostly thinking of the forums. How are the forums doing? TIG Source itself is not has not an update in a very long time on their
Oh,
main
the
page.
indie game. Oh, sorry, I'm forgetting the word source. Okay, so it'd be the indie game source.
Yeah.
TIG Source.
Yes.
Okay. I'm thinking of like TIG welding.
Oh. I don't think it.
I'm on the other TIG Source forums
Okay.
learning
Yeah.
about TIG welding,
That which is its own
but yeah,
subculture of like,
yeah.
oh, now I'm
Uh,
getting into like for whatever you think exists for independent games, that same thing exists for like every other subculture that you can imagine.
right. Yeah, the crocheting. I'm on the crocheting forums. I'm on
Yeah.
the yeah, there's always something out there. Embroidery forums.
The latest crocheting drama which is going on.
Oh man, they released the number two.
One.
Uh, I can't even make a good embroidery. They released the number two paddle, and it's not compatible with the first iteration of the embroidery paddle, and I
Yeah,
can't.
no, it's the latest crochet YouTubers getting canceled. They
Yeah, no,
they
it's all
stole all their
drama. It's
patterns from
all
other
drama.
people.
Yeah, I heard they were lifting patterns from,
Right.
and I found they were like in an old '70s magazine. They were pulling them out and claiming them as their own.
Well, I can't
Just,
believe it.
just a, I know it's abysmal. I can't believe that's the world we're living in.
It's too bad
What
human
happened?
human existence will forget all of this in 30 to 40 years.
What,
That's
when the slate gets wiped clean?
yeah, the cultural slate the cultural slate is constantly getting wiped, and people it's just like it's fun to like sit back and like think about that and remember like uh how quickly like how few pieces of art survive each year, so to speak.
Right.
Like,
Did we get off topic? I don't even remember where
this
we
show
were.
doesn't really have a topic. It's just kind of
Ah,
like
okay.
yeah,
We're
I think
flowing.
of I think of it as like how when you're like hanging out after a convention, you're just kind of like shooting the shit. That's what the show is, and
Uh, I I do have vague memories of that in my life where I was at a convention,
yeah,
but I like the shooting the shit part.
that's what the show is. Except people are listening to it, I guess. uh, uh, this
Yeah,
year,
I edit the part where I think of it people listening. Like
yeah,
I have to like quell that part of my brain, and I just have to shrink it down to it's just a conversation with like a single human being.
Yeah, and that's basically how I frame it. I mean, for what it's worth, unless someone in the chat is someone I know, I the chat is a usually ignored wasteland. This is not a this is on twitch.tv, but this is not a Twitch stream, you know. We're not
Right.
we're not shouting out Bong Lord for like thanks for the bits Bong Lord. What's going on? Glad to have you here.
Bong Lord.
Oh,
Bong Lord.
my truest favorite follower.
Dope Throne.
Dope. Uh, I I I'll admit publicly I like weed metal or whatever, and the general culture for a guy who ate one edible and got frustrated by it. It's just not for
Are you
me.
referring to are you referring to Stoner Doom?
Stoner Doom. I'm a fan of Stoner Doom. I have a couple Weedian compilations, on my
Okay.
computer,
Yeah,
but
I'm a big I like Stoner Doom a lot.
it's a truly pleasurable life. It's like my
Yeah.
my dream when I look at an album, my dream is to see 30 tracks that are it's like, oh, a 40-minute album with 30 tracks or an hour and a half album with 2 tracks.
Or one track
Oh,
if
one
you're playing
track.
your cards right.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's we can only have so many dope smokers in the world.
I'll take the 70-minute one track album
Yes.
is a good staple of mine. Yeah. I'll just put that on and let it grind for a good hour and change.
Let it do it. Let it do its business, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
thank you. I'll see you again in a week. Sleep, but until
Yeah,
then,
exactly. It's a good for as a game developer too, you always need uh long form stuff to listen to.
right?
So whenever you find like a good album that you can just put on and uh it can salve you for, an hour's worth of work, like those albums are really valuable.
Yeah,
So I've never quite found another dope smoker. Um they're rare. It's hard to find a good like 1 hour chunk that you can just put on and work to. Um,
that ideally will also loop, and then you don't even realize that you've been 5 hours in because it just has nice churn to it.
yeah, yeah, that thing I describe it as a chew. It's got a good chew.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, if there's anyone and if anyone has any recommendations in the comments for another dope smoker, I'll take it. But yeah, they're very a good one. Like there's a lot of knockoff stuff out there, but in terms of like a real classic, those are actually quite rare in that
yeah. That
genre.
that that's part of why I hope Bandcamp is okay. um, uh,
I mean, like anything, I think
yeah, or some
it's
they
got a
find
layer
something
of
else.
I think it's they've got a layer of fat on them.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like I think of it like that, like an organism where I think it can get I think Bandcamp has enough fat on it to get sick a couple times and make it through. Uh, it's when companies get really thin and lean, that's when it's really precarious because they don't have the sort of the stockpile to stay, alive
right,
during a
right.
shuffle. So I feel like yeah, they've got enough like inertia on them or like enough, calories or whatever analogy you want to use. Um, so I'm not too worried about them right now, but yeah, when companies start getting scrappy and like sinewy, then they make really desperate, weird choices, and then they do something really stupid. Um, and then
Once
you just see a company like disappear overnight.
once it gets sold 2 or 3 more times.
Yeah, I think of those buying and selling stages. That's almost like getting like a flu or pneumonia or something. Like that's a moment of weakness. Um, uh, and then usually they can recover from that. So yeah, Bandcamp still feels ostensibly the same
Yeah.
as it did a few years ago, but like you can see how quickly, how many fucking colds has Twitter got in the
Yes.
past year,
Twitter has gotten
right?
Twitter's gotten one, and then it just
And
like is going from one to another. It hasn't recovered yet.
yeah, so you can see, you're watching Twitter. If you're thinking of Twitter like an organism, it's it keeps getting sick over and over, and we all know who's giving it the fucking colds. We can
Right.
point the finger pretty directly. Somebody
Someone's
keeps coming in.
coming in the room and coughing every so often.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, someone, I don't know who, I don't want to name names.
No.
Someone keeps wandering in and sneezing and coughing and wheezing and hacking up like phlegm in the sink. And that Twitter as like an organism keeps getting sick. And each time it does, it gets a little leaner and it loses a little bit more fat. Um, and so it's the trajectory of it is a lot more precarious. It's really good when you go to a website or whatever, a service or something, and it hasn't changed in 5 years
Yes.
or 10 years.
I can just go to, I can fire up ubu.com and it's probably unchanged since 1996.
Yeah, there's a handful of those still out there. I'm trying to think of one that I use. Um, but I've got a couple of old staples that I pull up, and they're more or less the same. They're more or less the exact same thing that they've been 10 years ago. And anything I've seen that's like mutated really rapidly, it's either it's gone or I don't use it anymore because it's shed all of its utility.
Yeah.
So like an example is like I've been using Winamp nonstop since maybe 1998 or 1999. I've never not used Winamp, and it's remained stable and usable
Right.
for goddamn, what is that, 23, 24 years. Um, Whereas, if you did the full like iTunes migration and sort of consolidated everything into iTunes, but then they killed I don't even know what it is now. I don't think it's iTunes
Apple
anymore.
Music.
Is it Apple Music now? Yeah, like that whole thing is shifted so many times, and whereas to the point where I know people that just use Spotify because they can't be bothered to
Yeah.
be their own librarian anymore. They have no idea where their MP3s are, or what they own, or what's DRM'd, what's not. Like, um, it was just so many layers of like mutation and upgrades and updates, and yeah, it's really bizarre. So anytime I can find like a tool, like I don't need a hammer to mutate every year. I just need
No.
it to be a hammer.
Right. It does
I don't need
exactly.
like a new, yeah, I don't need a new fancy hammer where they
Right.
added shit to it.
Does this thing play MP3s? Yes. Could it also play
Yeah.
FLAC? Sure. We're good.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And can I play if I end up with some old weird what were those things? Those A track. If
Yeah.
I dig up some weird A track clip or some what was that? What was that? Microsoft WMA, Windows
Yeah.
Media
I, I
something.
have I have Fubar, which I think will play it all. Uh,
Yeah,
it even
that's
has
all I
like
need.
MIDI instruments, like different MIDI instruments I can choose if I'm playing a MIDI track.
Oh, for like yeah, like you can play what are those SNES songs called SMC, I think.
It could probably
There's a
like
bunch of like there's like chip tune general MIDI stuff, and you can just drag it into Winamp and it'll just play it. Or it'll do its best.
right.
It'll do its best job playing it. You can listen to all your whatever Streets of Rage soundtrack
Yeah.
in
I don't, I don't think VLC has changed since I first downloaded it.
yeah, VLC is another perfect example of that. I don't need VLC to have anything but like a stupid orange construction
Right.
pylon
And the ability to
and
play video files.
yeah, most video files. If you drag a video file into VLC and it can't play it, it's not VLC's fault. It's like it's whoever encoded it. Some
Yeah.
weirdo picked some nerd on a Linux forum somewhere was just like, oh, I AQX encoding,
Is the
wow.
superior
And like,
encoding format. Or it's like, well,
yeah, and
yeah,
and they're like, dude, no one has that. And they're like, but it's more efficient. And then they encode all their, 23 seasons of Inuyasha
yes.
in some obscure codec, and then VLC can't play it. And it's like, okay, the dude, the dude went a little off the script,
But
went
but
off road.
but
And,
it is 1 megabyte smaller.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And he's, flipping out over that 1 megabyte that he saved, completely picking an obscure and obtuse video codec. So that
Not assuming this is the type of person who would have terabytes of storage on their Plex server or whatever.
happened. What's more efficient? Oh,
Uh, yes,
so
but that's the freaks are the true freaks are the people who make VLC in the first place. It's like this kind
yeah,
of
or
the obsessiveness about it.
I don't know. You know what? VLC on one of my computers, I don't know what the fuck happened to it. It bit rotted or
Oh,
something, and VLC can get into these weird territories where I don't know what happens. It loses connection with some of its codec repository,
oh,
or
weird.
it gets into a weird memory handling state. Like I've had VLC go sour on a couple of different computers, um, or it'll start to stutter. Really weird shit. And it's always like I flicked some random flag in the
Oh,
like super advanced settings. Like I was trying to get something to play. I go onto some forum somewhere, and they're like, "Oh, find the flag for enhanced memory write APC, bootloader functionality. Like, make sure that's not checked." And then I'll go in and I'll like uncheck some box. I'll forget about it, and then slowly over 6 months or whatever, VLC will like develop a memory leak, or I don't know what the fuck happens, and then it goes bad, and then I have to, I don't know, try to either fully reinstall. Anyway, just that I've seen VLC go
yeah, right,
sideways a
right.
few times.
Yeah,
It's a weird, it's a weird little organism.
software is
Um,
imperfect, but no need to purposely make it imperfect just because you need to update it every 3 months.
yeah, exactly. I don't need new features, and I don't need it to phone home or like start sharing and like trying to connect to my social media so people can see what I'm watching.
No, I very
Homework.
rarely do I need any program to share something.
Yeah.
That's but then I lose out on the virality of people sharing my thing. I,
Yeah, yeah, you're probably fine.
yeah, yeah, no, I don't think I. It's a weird thing when you realize you trade in something that has like a little viral potential. But it's like relaxing in a weird way. It's like, oh, this doesn't have like will never have like the vibe that would be like, oh, look at this thing. It doesn't have the immediate appeal. Like a lot of things, plenty of good things do not have that immediate viral appeal.
Yeah, there's a weird thing with, I feel like it's a problem with a lot of modern media. Like it has to be immediately arresting
Yeah.
for the audience. And there was something about, and I'm sure you remember this like from the 90s. I'm just gonna go dip into like old man
Yeah.
times
Yes,
now, but
the long begun 1990s. I mean, it is like 30
so
years ago, so I guess so.
yeah, it's something. Yeah, it's not nothing. I know, right? In my head, the 90s is like the year right now is the year 2000, so the 90s is
Yeah.
a couple years ago.
Right. And
Um,
I still encounter
but
things from 90s media that feel foreign to me. So I it just I was watching a movie and they had like they put CDs in a caddy before loading them. I had never seen that
a
before in my
caddy.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a little. That wasn't just before my time. It was like I feel like that was more. That was those were like research computers or like university computers. Like I
Yeah.
feel like it was an
Okay.
earlier type of disk drive. So I don't think most home offices were doing the caddy thing. I think
Yeah.
that was as soon as like Creative Sound Blaster. CD-ROM drives started being like the standard.
Well,
Uh, caddies just caddies didn't make it. I think caddies were on the scene for like a minute.
well, maybe that was
Um,
a bit of character building. I understand to show that the person had a lot of cool high tech.
was it the net? Were you watching
No,
the
this
net with
this was
Sandra
this
Bullock?
was the classic film Brain Scan, which
Did
is
I watch Brain Scan? Who's
I
in that? What's in
I don't
that?
know if I would recommend people watch Brain. If you have a friend and you guys like trashy horror movies,
Is that the Christopher Walken
no, it's got Eddie
VR one?
Furlong in it.
Edward Furlong?
Yes,
Oh, I like Edward Furlong.
and he's there's a evil video game
Huh.
that makes him
I don't
murder
know. I'll check it
people.
out.
And there's a fun little guy in there called Trickster. He's got a. I like horror movies that have weird little guys in them. You know, they're just like
Brain Scan.
weird little freaks that are just hanging out. We're
Is
like,
this
yeah.
is this pre or post Terminator 2 Furlong? Because it's American History X Furlong.
This is in '90s. No, he looks like T2. So
Okay. Okay. So
it might
yeah,
be the
right
same.
around
Might be
there.
the same year.
That's a hell of a fucking
No,
year.
3 years later. 3 years later.
Okay. So he's a little older, but he probably
Right.
still has the general
But
furlonginess.
yeah, but like like if you hadn't seen Terminator 2 and in a little while and you looked at me like, "Oh, that's how he looks in Terminator 2." But if you saw them back to back, I'm sure he looks older a little.
Yeah. I don't think he ever really got I don't think he was like a particularly uh hirsute kind of guy, so I
Yeah.
feel like I don't think he got all stubbly, or I can't really picture him with like a mustache or anything. So he probably just retained that youthful Terminator 2, malaise
Right.
for
Just
a chunk of time.
slightly older with a nice crack in his voice. But yeah,
Yeah, you hire him for the crack.
a lot of
That's hey,
yes, exactly.
listen,
Oh,
like you can't do that. Don't kill people.
that's exactly. He's telling Mr. Brain Scan that. But
Oh,
yeah,
really?
yeah.
Is
He's
that what
like, no, he
like,
can't
don't
just.
kill
The video games
people.
can't kill people. Anyway,
That's cool.
it's trashy, and there's a lot
I
of
like the trash.
weird a weird number of. I like to also look at background, like especially like set dressing and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I love that stuff.
A lot of a lot of posters for Aerosmith's "Get a Grip," like in every teenager's bedroom.
Really, I don't
Yes,
know. I don't. Aerosmith is one of those bands where it feels like it was perpetually before my time,
yes, that's why I
and
was very confused to see it.
I don't actually know. Is Aerosmith? Did they start in the 70s? I feel like they were just around
I
sort
think
of
that
perpetually, but I could never place what year Aerosmith.
I
Like, what year is Aerosmith?
I think they started in the '70s, and then they had like
Okay.
eras of
Oh, okay.
like they like came and went periodically.
Okay.
That's my understanding of them. But it was
Because yeah, I know things like I know Guns N' Roses hit
yeah.
at a time, and you could find it like, it's like you could map it on a chart or whatever, like a seismic chart. But I don't know where Aerosmith was introduced, and then I don't know what its longevity was. So if I saw Aerosmith in like a teenager's bedroom, if I saw like a poster in a movie, that bedroom could be from, I don't know, 1978 to 1996.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like it's a weird. It doesn't work that way with a lot of bands. So I don't know what
He
the
also
deal
had
is
a
with
"Pleased to
Aerosmith.
Meet Me" poster, which
What's that?
is the classic Replacements album.
It's Pleased to Meet Me.
"Pleased to Meet Me,"
What's that?
album by if you're familiar with the Replacements, the Mats, I think as they call them.
The band is called The Replacements.
Yes. Oh, Louis, we had at least we don't have time for me to tell you about the Replacements.
Okay.
I love the Replacements. It's
I
some
know The Replacement Killers with Mira Sorvino and Chow Yun Fat,
no,
but
that is not them.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
That that would be a good band.
that would yeah. What would that band be? So
Or
okay, so that
Sorvino and Italian Fat.
yeah. So now I don't feel as bad anymore when I play the Replacements on the stream because I'm like, oh yeah, of course people know who the Replacements are. Minneapolis band, classics. Anyway,
Uh, yeah, my music knowledge, like I, my music knowledge is really unusual. I realize, um, I grew up on a really unusual diet of things, and I basically bypass entire chunks of sort of North American music history.
you're right.
Um, so there's a whole bunch. Basically, the '80s is a smoking crater where I don't know from. Yeah, I just don't know '80s music, and I don't know a lot of '90s music. I know because it was mixed in on the countdowns on
Right.
like it was MTV. It would have been MTV for you. For us in Canada, it was Much Music. But it's whatever. It was ostensibly the same countdowns, the top 30 music video countdowns. And so you watch that for enough years and you get a general sense of, whatever the musical zeitgeist is. So it's like I'm hearing whatever Smashing Pumpkins, I'm hearing Sarah McLachlan, whether I like it or not.
Yeah,
Um,
that's where you get music from. You only get music where you get, unless you're paying for it, you basically get it where from the radio or from the music video countdowns. You know?
yeah, it was music video count. So I'm much more aware. It's much harder to surprise me with a band from the '90s because I
Yeah.
just would have been exposed to a much broader spectrum. But the '80s, I wasn't watching, MTV or Much Music in the '80s. So there's whole empires that rose and fall in the '80s, and people will be like, I don't even know
Right.
name an '80s band.
uh, uh, I'm trying to think of. Were
Killing
there's
Joke?
what was
I
that?
don't know. Killing Joke, is that's an '80s band, right?
Is it? Now you've hit me with one I don't know. I'm like, that's a comic
well
book, of
well
course.
oh, is that the Joker,
That's that
the Joker's
Alan
thing?
Moore book. Killing Joke
um
is an English band, yes, formed in 1979, but they extended on until 1996. Um,
okay, anyway,
yes,
something will just come up and I'll be like, I don't know anything about that because I wasn't exposed to it in on radio. Not that I listen to a ton of radio, but I just wasn't exposed to it. So
yeah,
but it's like to me it's like department store music. So I'll be in a department store and they'll be playing something on the PA system and I just don't register it whatsoever. Like it goes in one ear and out the other. Um, and so I feel like that's the case. Yeah, like there's just huge chunks of like I'd say between I don't know 1976 up until like 1992. There's just this giant missing block of stuff, and I can pick things out of there that I know. But you know, when I think of music in the '80s, I think of like Napalm Death, Scum. Like I'm like that'd be like my top '80s
right.
album.
I don't even know how to like pin. See, I grew up and then I shed most of my musical stuff, and I was like, I just kind of started fresh around
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah,
college
yeah, yeah.
age.
Flush the whole system out, I
Right,
think is a
right.
good
You don't
tactic.
you don't need it. I'm like, I don't need any of this stuff. I can just start fresh, and then since then, like I'll just pop into when you start using Bandcamp more extensively, you just kind of find yourself listening to like entirely almost unheard of. You go on Spotify, you see 12 monthly listeners or whatever,
Right.
and that's kind of like, but it's not.
I'm agreeing. Actually, I've actually never used Spotify in my life, but I can
Yeah,
I can synthesize the experience
right. Yeah, they got
of what it would be
stats.
like. That's weird. Yeah, Bandcamp I like because Bandcamp really is total unknown stuff, and the barrier to entry is so low that it really can just be musicians putting their music up that have no technical ability.
Yeah,
I think that's really important. Uh, I was debating whether to announce this on your podcast. I don't know. What kind of listenership do you have? Like what are your numbers like?
let me click on it right now. I think there's 4 people in here. What
Okay.
are my monthly? I never check my stats. What do my stats say if I go to Anchor?
Yeah,
It's 28.
give me the stats. 28 people.
I have 80 Spotify followers.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not
Okay,
a widely trafficked. I mean, this is like a niche of a niche of a niche, you know?
that's cool. Yeah, that's so one thing I'll say
Yeah.
because I've been teasing this all week, not that I have a particularly large following either. Um I'm releasing the Jazz Punk soundtrack. That's like my big end of year announcement. It's been 10 years and there's
Yeah,
been no Jazz
I
Punk
got
soundtrack.
and I've got the hot Indiepocalypse radio scoop. I've got
Yeah,
exclusives coming through.
yeah, so I'm giving you a scoop. Not that anyone gives a shit, but
I think that's
um
like that's the important mentality I've developed of like I no longer caring if anyone gives a shit, you know?
yeah, exactly. I'm just it's this thing where when I made the music for that game, it was made over many years
Yeah.
and it was most of it was recorded to tape because I was using really I had a really analog setup. And so it's taken me 10 years to go back and actually dig through. I think it's I calculated it once. It's like 35 hours of music I made for that game.
Oh wow. That's
Um,
yeah.
and so I had to go and wade through all of the master recordings and pick out, um, all the best bits and then actually remaster all of them to be, appropriate for a soundtrack. So that's just a thing that's taken forever. And I'm working on another game, like an unannounced game right now. So it's like taking the time away from that game to then go work on the soundtrack was really daunting. Um, but at some point, that soundtrack is going to come out. I forget how I got onto this thread. We were talking about.
Talk about Bandcamp. Anyone can just release their own stuff. However, that's a
Oh
cool.
yeah. So what I learned is that trying to get this soundtrack on other services that aren't band, because I'm used to, I have my music on Bandcamp. It's
Right.
fine. But when you go to another service and try to put your music on it, holy shit, is it insane? Like there's like uh command line things and like like they're like boot into our terminal and like, hack the Gibson, um, upload all your files in this really specific form. Like really weird technical things. And I'm like, this is not musicians aren't going to use this. It's
No.
too it's just too obfuscated and if you have to like boot into some weird, Unix shell account to interface with their FTP server or something, um, and run batch file, like actual literal batch files, like it's 1994.
Right.
Um,
Uh,
it's
I,
crazy. It's
I,
crazy.
I
Sorry.
am like mildly technically minded, and I put off using just like Butler for itch for like so long because I was like, I don't want to set this shit up.
Oh, is it command line stuff?
Yeah, and you have to like set up through the
Yeah.
command line and link your accounts, and it's actually very easy to do, sort of. But you have to
Right.
like anything that requires like baseline operating system level setup before you set up the program itself is like just that extra barrier, you know?
It's just not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah. Ain't nobody got time for that.
No, it's I just want to click on a thing that says upload, and people say, and then it says yes, and it uploads it. That's what allows people like anything that kind of like removes the barrier is better, you know.
Yeah. Or you know what I'll take? One of my favorites. I love a good drag and drop.
Yes. Oh,
If I can drag it and drop it, oh man, now you got yourself a system. Hook
yeah,
me up with
because
that.
it is definitely. Oh, I was looking at my wrap. I'll close that now. Um, I was like, people are giving me all these fun stats about this podcast, and I was like, I'm no longer interested in them. But
I
yeah,
don't want to see the stats.
my most new listeners were in France this year.
Mm,
It's
bon
international.
appetit.
international show. Because that,
C'est bon.
cause that is the point of it. It should be like uh, the thing I'm thinking more about is like the barrier to entry in games in like, quote unquote video games is why you find out, it's why, like you said, 10 years on, there's still like people are still not really making that many different games within the obvious big sphere of cultural video games.
Right.
It's because like it requires such a buy-in and like monetarily and time based, and they're like it feels impenetrable often.
And it is.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, I mean, it's one of the major weaknesses of the medium is that the only people that make video games are the shape of person that can handle the game development process. So you only you only ever get to play stuff from the type of person that is willing to sit down in front of a computer for, God, I don't even know how many hours it is, but
Right.
10,000 hours, I don't know.
Right.
And so you'll never encounter a game that is made by a person where that is not their tolerance.
Yeah, I
And
always.
I mean, and that's true for any, like, you're not going to get, you know, you're not going to get guitar music from somebody who also is not willing to sit down in front of a guitar for 10,000 hours or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
um, it's a pre-filtered psychology. I think that's the weirdness of games. It's like it pre-filters for a very particular type of psychology that would actually endure the horror of making a video game.
Right, and it doesn't have like the kind of ceiling, I guess, for what a game is kind of um, creeping up slowly and slowly.
Mhm.
Like that, like, games are need to be that is part of that. I think part of why I think it's interesting or like worth people arguing about what indie is, because if indie just becomes $3 million studio projects, then it just becomes harder. If the culture below it, like, that's the same in indie musicians. Plenty of
Mhm.
them have uh, inroads into the industry or plenty of funding as well, and that applies to everything. But there needs to games, I think, need that stronger. Games need zines. Like
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out. I think I want to try to make a zine, um, partially because I like tangible objects,
yeah,
but there's something about zines interface with a community very differently than games do. Zines also don't require any kind of they don't have to run on anything. They run on
yeah,
themselves. You hold the
yes,
zine in your hand and you use your eyeballs. Uh, so there's not this like weird hardware requirement. Like I make tapes, like I see you sell tapes,
yeah,
indie game tapes with a USB stick in them.
yes. That's
But
Mike.
did you have some tapes? I feel like I saw you had some tapes too.
I did not have any actual tapes with cassettes inside of them.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I sell tapes of my music.
Yeah.
Um, but every now and then I'm always encountering somebody who goes, "Oh, I'd love to buy your tape. I don't have a tape player."
Yes.
And and it's like, "Oh yeah, shit. Okay, so there is still this like to me, I've always owned a tape player. Like I never did the thing where I purged all of my tape recorders during the whatever 2000s. I feel like
Yeah.
that was like a mass purge occurred. I never did that. So I've owned a Walkman since I was a kid, in one form or another. Not I've owned the same Walkman, God forbid. Um, but I've always owned a Walkman, and so it's funny to me when I go to like a show or something and I'm selling tapes, and it's like, oh, there's a gap there. Like there's people that are discovering tape, but tape is like a new medium for them.
Right.
And then there's people like me where they grew up with tape and then maybe they put it down for a bit and then they're back into tape. So But zines don't have that. Zines are just like, oh yeah, I can, I know how to flip pages.
Right. It's
I'm
just
good at that.
it's a piece of paper.
Yeah, it's great. So I think there's something about making a zine where there really is no technological barrier to entry, the way other formats that I dabble in, especially games is the worst, obviously,
Right.
for that.
Yeah,
The amount of buy-in.
and the ones without like the large tech buy-in, there's like, you know, no one's porting a Bitsy game to Switch, uh,
Yeah,
or selling them
exactly.
on Steam. Like there's like it's assumed that if you're making like an actual proper video game, you got to put that thing in Unreal or Unity or whatever, and it has to have like certain,
Yeah.
like there's an understanding of like, oh, these are the video game ones, and there's that clear demarcation between this is like a hobbyist, I guess, a fun tool, and then this is a real tool. But there's not like a, or there feels like there is less of a game hobbyist market, and unfortunately, people need money. Uh,
Yeah, I've always, I mean, first of all, it's a shame that basically it's a two-party system where
yeah,
you really are, it's Unity or Unreal. And then if you are an insane computer science nerd, you can home roll your own engine. Um, and it's funny because the people that home roll their own engines are always like, "Oh, it's not so bad. I do it. It's important to me." And I'm like, "You're building a fucking rocket engine,
right.
like what don't like it's cool that you're doing that, and I think that's an incredibly important skill to maintain, the idea that there are still extreme dedicated computer science nerds out there that want to do that. But um for them, it's almost like the artistry is in building the engine itself, and not about building the subsequent experience that engine allows. You know what I mean? Like they're tool makers.
Yeah, right, right.
Um,
And
and so
and
being a smith, like a metalsmith, and making a hammer, that's really important. But being a person who can take a hammer and then go build a giant Trojan horse with it or something is a completely different uh we call that carpentry. It's a
right.
completely different skill set.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I wasn't gonna say anything meaningful.
Um, so anyway, yeah, the two-party system of Unity and Unreal is like a real you can feel the way in which that limits the medium right now. And I would I would love more competition in that space. Like there should be so many tools. Um, there should be so many tools for game development. And of course, there's probably someone in the forum or something right now being like, "Oh, there's Godot and there's well, all these things," but
Yeah.
they don't. They're either new and they're going through their growing pains, or they haven't been fully established as like uh, you know something that you can invest in for many years and it will
Yeah.
remain stable. Um,
Or
there's a cool. Oh, sorry, go
there's
ahead.
or there's an assumption, especially like, oh, if I want to get a job, or I want people to invest in this thing, or I want to be part of the video game machine or whatever. There's like, okay,
Mhm.
there's implied because uh there's like an indie game, I think it's called something like Undertale. uh I think that was made in Game Maker. I think it got some traction. um but
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly game
there
maker games out
Yeah,
there.
but it's not like, oh yeah, now I'm gonna go take my Game Maker experience to where they're very much like, you feel like solo project kind of engines.
Mhm. Yeah, I would love a good, stable variety of tools
Yeah,
out there, in the way that, for other like there's a million synthesizers, there's a million guitars, there's a million cameras. If you're a filmmaker or a photographer, like there's just so many options for those tools. And um, with games, it's like the tools are. So they're also very temporal because they actually have to run on, they have to build for contemporary hardware,
Right.
and that contemporary hardware in the computer space mutates quite substantially every few years. And so, you know, like my game is almost 10 years old. Jazzpunk's almost 10 years old. And people ask us, they're like, hey, can you port it to Switch? You know, can you port it to whatever? And I was like, no, I can't, because it's built on a very old version of Unity that can't build for those modern platforms.
Right.
It's just it's severed. The lineage is severed. And so I'd love to hit a button and have a buildable version of Jazzpunk for the Switch, but I can't do that. I actually would have to, and it wouldn't be me. It would be my partner Jess. Is He's the programmer for our company, but he would have to sit there and basically rebuild the entire game in a newer version of Unity to make that feasible.
Right, and
Um,
that's not even like that's within. It's like, oh, I'm not adapting to a new OS. I'm adapting to a new version of the same software I'm using.
yeah, exactly. So that your projects like from and I mean anyone who works in Unity knows this, and I'm sure this is maybe partially true for Unreal, but like there's a million versions of Unity. Uh, it'll be like Unity point 2017 F3 release 2 candidate long term, and then and like the amount of versions of Unity out there is more than I can memorize. It's
Yeah,
insane, and all of them have different bugs, and all of them have different porting capabilities, and so it's like building your game on Unity really doesn't even mean anything. It's like building your game on a very specific version of Unity ends up becoming the thing. So it's like imagine, it's like I don't know. Uh, you're learning on a guitar. You're trying to make something on a guitar, and they're like, "Oh, you're using a Gibson version 2.3 BS2, short-term support UDF. That doesn't actually, you can't record with those anymore.
no,
Like
that it doesn't.
the software is out of date.
The guitar can actually make G chords, as it turns out. So
Yeah, yeah, there's a bug. The G's turn to C's.
yeah.
So,
Oh,
uh,
oh,
you
you
know,
go to the guitar store and you can't buy any strings anymore because none of these.
yeah, yeah, they're like, oh, they discontinued the strings for that particular model. Sorry,
Yeah,
should have picked a more robust guitar to like build your music on.
yeah, right.
Sorry. And you're like, cool. Okay, well, I wrote all my music on this guitar. And they're like, yeah, well, that guitar is a weird one-off. It's out of date.
Yeah,
So it sucks. It really sucks trying to invest in game tools because the tools themselves deprecate um, so rapidly. Uh, it's a really bad problem. Um, I don't know. I wish there was I want more competition in that space. I would love a scrappy little game engine that just works,
right.
and I can build my dumb little 3D things in it, and I want something as stable as a guitar. I
Right.
love that you can go buy a guitar from 1958 and it still just has a quarter-inch jack on it, and you
Yeah.
can still plug it into any amp, and nothing has changed. It's like literally the same technology. Um, and I think it's amazing that like phones didn't change for like almost 100 years. Like you can go buy a Bakelite phone from the 30s, and you could have used it in the 90s. Like it had the same
Right. It's just that same
rip.
jack. It's just the same wire
It had the
because
same jack.
it works.
Yeah, and it would yeah, and it worked. Yeah, exactly. So they stuck, like those standards stuck around for so long, and it made a very reliable, not to say that the 20th century didn't have all kinds of problems.
Right.
Lord
No,
knows. But
but the phones. We're talking about phones here.
the well, the stability of the tools and the standards of those tools, I think was like 35 millimeter film. I love that I can go buy some random camera from the 70s and I can still go to a camera store and get 35 millimeter film. And there's nothing, obviously, there's a bunch of obsolete film types and things, and there's weirdo cameras you can get, but like I can go grab a Canon AE1 from 1975. I can plunk film in it and I can go shoot, and there's nothing hindering that process. But
Right.
if I go try to build a game on an engine from 10 years ago, good luck.
Right. There's. I wonder how much of it is just like there being a physical standard, and it's just like mentally harder for people to want to change it. Because then it's like,
Yeah,
oh, if we change it, then all of these amps no longer work, and it's just like just human beings. Because software could work the same way, but a human is deciding to make it more obsolete. Or not just working to make sure everything is backwards compatible to the best. Like this is all a thing. I guess it's also different platforms. There's got to be new consoles every so often, I suppose, for some reason. And
yeah. I know it's funny because I'll play a game from like a PlayStation 1 game or maybe a PlayStation 2 game. And honestly, I'm like, it could have just stopped here. Like
yeah,
I'm like, I don't play, I don't know, I go play a PlayStation 5 game. It's ostensibly a PlayStation 2 game with more shaders on it.
right,
Like
right,
the gameplay isn't any better. It's literally so much so that they're remaking games and they're not really changing the gameplay. It's just that they've updated the graphical
right.
layer of
Because
it.
because
Um,
that's the secret. I mean, because gameplay is not like it never gets better. Uh, it just people kind of glom onto different techniques, but it's not like it gets better. It's not like it's improving. It can't.
I think it could.
Right,
I think it could. It's just not how we think. It's not how the industry is still very graphically focused
right.
uh, and scale focused, and not. They don't invest in action. They don't invest in the evolution of games as a medium. They invest in the evolution of graphics
Yeah,
as a rendering benchmark. So the PlayStation 5 or whatever Xbox something, I don't even know what it's called now, but um, the PlayStation 5 is like it's beefier in all of these ways, except none of those things are most of those things are not about improving the evolution of gameplay.
yeah. No.
They're just about visual fidelity enhancement. Um, and
Yeah.
so,
Last week's guest Megan Byrne was talking about how she was like, I would like I would trade two generations of graphics for better crowds, better crowd generation kind of stuff
oh
because
yeah, yeah, exactly. There's all kinds of stuff you could throttle. I would trade so many things. Like again, I'm fine with PlayStation 1 or 2 graphics.
right,
If as long as the game is being chewed on and being improved upon, I think that's more uh it's very rare that I encounter a game where it felt like the investment was actually in looking for new types of, interactive spaces.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, right, because like it's or like somebody like finds one and then that becomes the kind of like the gameplay style that gets iterated on for the next 5-10 years or so. Someone's like, oh, I tried something new, and then it becomes because I think people think, oh, well, this is the right way to play this game now, I guess, to make an action game.
yeah, I mean, there's a generic type of or there's a ubiquity. Like there's a term that Jess and I use. It's we refer to it as omni game.
Yeah,
Um, and so ostensibly all AAA games now have merged into what I refer to as the omni game. Uh, and so like I'll go and buy. I mean this kept happening. I kept going and buying a new AAA game, and it would be whatever God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn,
right,
Ghosts of Tsushima, Fallout 4. Um, I don't know. The list goes on. Metal Gear Solid 5. I don't know. Anyway,
yeah,
I go and I play them, and I'm like, oh, it's the same game.
Right. They have a
It's
cursor
literally.
on for my menus. They
Oh,
have
not even. No,
yeah.
it's not that. It's like the game. It's like, okay, here's a big open world. Go pillage all of the bodies for loot.
Right.
Like, here's your stats. Here's the skill tree. Like, here's the NPC with the generic side quest where I go and I collect some shit and I bring it back. And I don't know, it just I would play them and I was like, oh, okay, these are all just different paint jobs on like the same skeleton, and they don't feel distinct enough from each other. Whereas there was a time when every time you would go and you'd play a game, they were still experimenting with all of those, just the idea of making like an explorable environment was so
Yeah.
novel and new that every game, even games that were sort of trying to copy each other, would end up very different because the way in which you would the way in which you would make a 3D explorable space was not, it hadn't been solidified yet. It hadn't been codified yet. Um, and so when I go back and I play a 3D, when I go back and I play like basically all PlayStation 1 games, I think are really fascinating because the rules, that the concrete had not set yet.
Yeah.
So when you play a shooter, everyone is doing it a little bit differently. When you play a racing game, everyone's doing it a little bit differently. When you play an RPG, RPGs got codified a lot
Yeah.
earlier, I think.
But there's still a lot of weird ones in there.
There's
Like
still
I
weird ones.
yeah, I think that's that, and because I think that helps because well, I mean, well, I think part of the problem is like people like, oh, we've codified and realizing that you don't actually need to codify anything. That like that was never the goal. Uh,
Yeah.
is to
Uh,
like is to, the goal was never to try and solve 3D exploration. Uh, People are just looking for better
yeah.
solutions.
Yeah, I like the idea that every developer kind of had to figure out their own, because when you have to paint a world, and you're met with limitations, uh, you then have to make really uh, careful decisions about what you're going to include in that world, and those end up being a form of constraint. And so it's expressive because when there's constraints, you have to make hard choices. You're like, okay, well, do I really need like waving tall grass in this landscape? Or is that orthogonal to the problem I'm trying to solve, which is this is a game about, you know, uh, whatever, raising deer or
Yeah,
something. I don't know.
maybe
There's
that
just,
would.
you have to make those choices. And
Yeah,
like
yeah,
now that the systems are so powerful that you don't have to make those choices anymore. So that just becomes everything in the kitchen sink is included because the system can handle it now. PlayStation 5 can handle everything that you throw at it.
right.
Um,
Every given
and
game
it,
can have 8,000 NPCs that all have a procedurally generated quest for me that I
yeah,
complete to
and
collect.
you can
Yeah,
copy mechanics from another popular game and just toss them in without much. There's not memory constraints on that. So, um, I always say like I really love the first Metal Gear Solid because it's running on a 33 megahertz system. It's like it has to make really hard choices about what interactions it's giving you at any given time. And then I found with each subsequent game, as the systems got more powerful, they just let you they just kept adding shit that you could
yeah,
do. Um, but then um, it didn't feel as honed in. It felt it felt burdensome. Um, because there's just too much, like every single button on the controller, like you're crouching and then you're sort of semi holding your gun, but then you can, like, all the buttons were on a PlayStation 2, like all the buttons were analog. So there's all these
yes,
weird things where you can like carefully ease off the square button and you'll like put your gun away. And it's like if you sneeze while you're playing that game,
right.
uh
Well, you're
you
trying
could
to.
like accidentally like pull a fucking walrus out of your pocket and
Right.
like set it on
I'm
fire
just trying to
or
hold up
something.
this guy, and I sneezed and I shot him.
Yeah, or you sneezed and you put your gun away and then he's like, he went full alert again and then there's like 30 guys trying to hunt you down. Um, so it's a really annoying kind of space to be in because it's like it doesn't feel filtered towards an experience. It's sort of like everything that could have been included was included. Um, it's like the opposite of brevity is the soul of wit.
Right.
It's the opposite of that. It's like exposition is the soul of wit, according
Yes.
to all of
Right.
these people.
Right. A video game will spend 80 hours to tell you that I'm selling shoes because my baby died,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and I went through 30,000 side quests to get to that point. Uh, I think I mean I've been saying video games need like just to be edited a little, just a tad, just like shave. I mean, because the weird thing I hear from people a lot, because I try to go to like more non-game spaces to hawk my wares, and like the thing I hear
Which is how I
from
met you.
yes, exactly, at Canzine, which is not a video game festival
Yeah.
at all, but
No, I was very surprised to see you there. I was like, what are you doing here? Who let
yeah,
you
no,
in?
I was surprised to see like there was like 10 people I knew there. It was very bizarre. It was a strange experience. The Toronto, apparently the home of Indiepocalypse, but
Yeah, yeah, just move here.
yeah, it's the same general temperature, same general vibe, kind of. I can
Yeah, the weather's not better.
no. As a New Englander, it basically feels basically the same. It's lateral,
Yeah.
and you guys have different things there. You got poutine. I could go to Jollibee in Toronto. I
I've
screwed
never
up.
been to a Jollibee.
I screwed up. I wanted to go to
I,
Jollibee, and I forgot about it. I was like, oh shit! I forgot
like
Toronto has them.
people are really weird with the pout. It's just gravy on
It
fries with
is,
like some
but
like it's so not a recipe.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
so like like I have no there's no national pride in it. Like it's not a recipe. It's like you dump some shit on a thing that was already delicious.
Yeah, it's just you're just
Um,
but that's I mean, it's the weird thing where when I travel, that's I like the like not the like the here's our local best such and such restaurant. Like what's your local horseshit, you know? Like
yeah, yeah.
what is like what can I
I guess
like
it's just weird to me that that's regional.
yeah.
Like I don't there's no like what's fries supreme at a Taco Bell, but like just a variation on poutine. Like you dumped some shit that's already delicious on top of French fries. Um,
Huh.
it's so not a recipe. You know what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say?
Yeah, no, it is
It's like
right. It's just like good food piled on top of good food. I mean, you dump things on
yeah,
fries.
exactly.
You're gonna be hard pressed to make fries taste bad, honestly.
I'm sure you could do it.
Yeah, no, I
I feel like fries. I feel like if you dumped a bunch of mustard on fries, I think that would suck.
I like mustard
Um,
a lot though, so maybe
I like it, but I don't want mustard on every fry.
yeah.
That's that
No,
would
I
really ooh, that bums me out to think about
I understand it, but you'll find no complaints from me here. I'll dip fries in
that.
mustard.
Okay, you'd eat,
I
you'd eat it.
you failed to
Uh,
reach your target audience, though I agree with you.
okay, let me rejig that. What
Yeah.
else would ruin it?
But also
Mm,
like 3 nights ago, I was at a friend's house and I was just eating raw Brussels sprouts. So out of the fridge,
raw?
raw. They're good, man. They're good. Just like a raw Brussels sprout,
Raw?
a nice fresh cold raw Brussels sprout. They're a little hard to munch when you're thinking about it, but they taste good, man.
Oh,
I like them. But I
you're
like
gonna do
so
really well in the apocalypse with
yeah. I
that.
guess what I'm saying is I have I have I don't like olives very much. That's like
Okay.
my
You're not in my camp. You're out of my camp.
yeah.
Get out of we're,
That's that's
I'm
that's my
strapping you to a horse and sending you out of the city.
that's my food kryptonite. But aside from that, I have a very I'm the person who says he'll tell you that you should just eat a kiwi whole and you won't even notice. Uh, and I
With the skin?
yes, you don't even
Oh
notice.
man. What do you mean you don't know? It's like Sand. It's literally sandpaper.
No, no, man. There was one day where I was like, I'm sick of spooning this kiwi. I'm just gonna eat it, and it's like barely even notice.
All
You
right.
just
Well,
gotta.
you'll do very well in the
I
apocalypse,
will. I'm planning on. I'm prepping. That's my
but
that's my prepper style. No, no guns, no canned food, just the ability to eat raw fruit.
yeah, but you're out of my. If I ever see you near
Yeah,
my olive kiwi fort, um, I'm shooting.
yeah. I'm like,
Don't because we skin our kiwis in Fort Luis,
yes.
and olives are also delicious. So I don't know what to tell you.
Uh, yeah, no,
I
I'll
mean, more olives for me. So maybe you're allowed.
right. I'll grimace and eat
Maybe
one if I have to, but uh,
is it just you didn't eat them as a kid? Is it one of those
I think it.
situations?
I think even as a kid, I didn't like them, and I just never. They're just too salty
Huh.
for me. I don't know what it is, but anyway, we've reached the talk portion of Indiepocalypse, which is my favorite portion. This is like finally fucking sick of video games. I hate those things. I love food, man.
Oh,
It's the
what
the,
are
the
your do you maintain like a list of questions?
uh
Like, do you have a list of like interview questions?
I've been thinking I should get more of them. Because usually here's my interview questions. What's that thing you made? Um, tell me about it.
What's what's that thing?
And if
That's
you and
funny.
if and see most of the guests are Indiepocalypse contributors, so I asked them, "Hey, how did you hear about this thing?" So I can get other people to hear about it. So I can get
Right,
other people to submit it because that's really like the only thing that will kill Indiepocalypse is people not submitting to it. Uh,
right.
it'll survive indefinitely
That's good.
otherwise.
That sounds like a robust system,
Yeah.
a system based purely on submission.
Right, because like I from even from like 5 years ago, I budgeted so that like I was like, no one's ever gonna buy this thing, but I want to do it. So I'm like, what is a budget that is affordable that I can do it if nobody buys it? And that's my
Right.
budget. And since then, it works
No,
out
that's
pretty well
good.
for me.
I'm glad you do it. I
Yeah,
wish I wish it was like you and 30 other people. It'd be
yeah,
nice to go to a zine style thing, zine canzine or whatever, zine fair, but it's all different punks and weirdos and stuff selling their sort of their own version of that,
yeah, yeah.
Like that would be so healthy if that existed.
I am trying to. Part of my goal for 2024 is like, what if can I get this? Can I get Indiepocalypse? Can I get university libraries to buy Indiepocalypse? Can I get like local game shops and stuff to stock Indiepocalypse? And I
That would
have.
be cool. Did you go to ANC Games when you were in Toronto?
I did not. I did not.
Oh, it
My
was like
Toronto
across the
state.
street from
Uh, my stay in Toronto
oh,
was like
sorry.
very
Yeah, it was
short.
like across the street. Oh, okay. It was across the street from the Canzine, so
That's. I
it would
wish
have
I
it would have
knew.
been like a 5 minute. Yeah, fuck, I didn't think of that. Anyway, it was like a 5 minute walk from where I met you.
Yeah. But that is like I'm thinking about stuff like that. Of like, I mean, I've already had like two or three people reach out to me and be like, "Hey, how do you do that tape thing you do?" And I'm like, "I'll give you all the info. Here is a bunch of store links or whatever. Here's how you." Because I think like game developers need like that zine level of artist. The I play my band at the local bar level of artist accessibility.
Yeah, I think that's important. Um, that sort of well, that's the thing. It's like you want things that are slightly lower investment because that's where you learn
Yeah.
and that's where you um, pivot. Like it's a much more nimble space. When games get larger and more complicated, you lose the ability to iterate and pivot and mutate just like as a not just like as a creator, but as an audience. Um, and yeah, the thing is like games just got so big and complicated that they're like a really slow moving, not evolving like Juggernaut or like Lummox or
Yeah.
something. Like they don't feel nimble, and they don't really feel like they can pivot on whatever the inflection points of like society and technology and taste, and in a way that music is obviously much more malleable, and
Right. And
music
like
can.
and that stuff, that a lot of that kind of stuff gets made on like and upload on itch, but like what is the cultural footprint of that,
Yeah. Yeah, and
it's
I don't meet like there aren't local places where I go and I meet a bunch of um, itch developers,
yeah.
and we swap tapes or like demo our the things that we're working on. Like they just don't it just doesn't have that like sharing, show and tell. Like that's the thing with the music scene is there's a little bit of a show and tell. So you'll play like a little dive bar, and or you'll go to see a show at a little local bar. um and a lot of the time you see people working on a new album in process, like
Yeah.
in progress, and they're still figuring it out a little bit, and they're testing things out. And they'll say like, oh, this is a new song, uh I'm playing it here for the first time. Like it just feels like it's people learning, but they're learning in public. And
Right.
with games, you don't get that thing. I mean, you get it every. I went to a maze for the first time this year in Berlin, and you can see a little bit of it at shows like that. But those shows themselves are so large, and you're paying like a big ticket to get into them. They're
Right.
not they're
And
not they're not like a $5 dive bar show. They're
right,
like,
right. They're
oh,
not.
I'm flying to another country and paying, for a a, a ticket for this like festival. Um, and it's like that would be like flying to somewhere and paying a ticket for a music festival, like some $120 music festival ticket.
Right.
And those aren't spaces where people are like trying shit out, iterating, finding community, yada yada, trading tapes, trading zines, selling stickers, selling, so that's the thing. It's like with indie games, I feel really there's a missing local iterative community. We're showing and telling the things that we're fucking around with.
Right. Right.
It's missing that. It's missing that tier, whatever that is, that whatever that's
Yeah.
called.
Yeah. Like I had to fly to Kanji. But Kanji cost like $40 Canadian,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
like I went to like I would go pretty routinely to a local market down in Rhode Island, and it cost $40. You know,
Right.
for like a full huge table
That's
space.
perfectly that's perfectly manageable for, for like a small operation.
Right.
And it's a perfect, and those venues aren't huge. You're not filling a giant, like, what is the thing? The Moscone Center in San Francisco or
Right.
whatever is where and that's like, okay, fuck, I'm gonna pay like $2,000 for a booth at the Moscone Center to
Yeah.
show my game in a booth. I'm like, that's not an easy, that's a very high barrier to entry.
Yes.
Um, and Indie Mega Booth, they were trying to sort of like, okay, well, Indie Mega Booth, okay, we're gonna buy a bulk chunk of space, and then we're gonna chop it up into these little mini kiosks for young, experimental developers to like show their stuff. So I get that they were trying to create a little micro space
But they're still
for
like two
people to
grand.
part, but there's still, yeah, it's still an expensive fucking thing, and it's like you'd think an industry as rich as video games could, shave off a couple bucks
Yeah.
for the little
Like
guy.
I live close enough to drive to PAX East, so I wouldn't even have to pay travel costs, and I still would side eye like a $2,000 mega booth fee. I'm like, that's still a lot of money.
That's a fuck ton of money. That's a new computer.
Right.
Um, or, a really expensive Nintendo game in box.
And like
So
and how much and how many people sell things there, and that's like 90%, like 99% of those people are hosting demo booths.
Yeah.
When
Yeah,
I go
they're
when I
not
go to
really
my
just
local
sell shit.
markets, I'm selling shit. I make that $40 back every single time. you know.
Yeah, that's great. As you know, as you should. And it's like, again, when you're playing like if you're a musician, you're playing small shows in your town, hopefully you're making at least enough money that night to pay for, whatever your uh, taxi or your, you know, yeah, hopefully you're selling a couple tapes. I mean, it's not
Yeah,
even really like it's not even really about money. Not to say that like money isn't an important component, but
right.
like,
But it limits the people who to limits it to the people who can afford to not think about money as much.
yes, exactly. And I think that's like a really that conversation is lost in a lot of game spaces where and part of it too is like there's only a handful of cities in the world that even really have sizable game communities.
Yeah,
Um, and Toronto has a lot of game developers, but it doesn't feel like it has much of a game community in the way that it did 10 years ago. Um,
right. And it's also
not cohesively.
very weird because a lot of my experience with local scenes is they feel also very industry bound or very like industry like traditional game space minded in terms of like what design is and what their goals are and everything. They're not like the same as like a local
Yeah.
art scene.
Yeah. Which is a lot more personal and can be a lot more eclectic, sort of depending on the brains of that era.
Yeah.
Um,
So
I don't know what the Toronto art scene looks like anymore, but also all the scenes in general just got fucked up from, 2, 3 years of pandemic.
right.
So,
A million venues closing and people getting used to being online and all those kinds of things.
and also just everyone scattering and
Yeah,
moving.
right.
Like so many people I know have moved in the past 3 years because whatever the situation of their life was, or their job or whatever has shifted. And so I still feel like there was this massive gut flora die off, right? Like it's like when you get a really bad flu and you lose all your gut flora and you basically can't digest anything for like a year while your
Right.
intestine tries to like rebuild its ability to like process food. Um, and so right now I kind of feel like that's where we're at. Like we're not we're not necessarily in the pit of sickness that we were, but um, we're still regrowing all of the ability we have to like, you know, chew on um, art, whether
Yeah,
the art is music or games or whatever it
and
is.
I'll tell you optimistically, the kids are all right, as they say.
Are they?
My experience, like one of my best shows I did was at a college. You know, they were like,
Yeah.
I think my working theory is that like, kind of like we were talking about on the show or before the show, I can't remember where it was, about internet as utility. People growing up with games having always existed in their mind, I think it's easier for them to process games equal art, because it's just like,
Hmm.
why wouldn't they be able to be? They don't have the same cultural baggage of games starting as very clearly like toys, marketed towards kids. Right?
Right.
They just exist as another medium.
Like they're
People.
just a faucet. It's just another faucet that's always been there.
Right. So it's like, oh, of course they're not limited to these styles, and like they can be sort of anything. Where I run into that problem sometimes with even older people who older louder
Yeah.
voices in games who broadly gesture vaguely towards itch.io, like
Right.
that. And it's like, do you spend any time on it, or do you just know that as a place where other games live?
Right.
Um,
There's there is definitely a generational divide where um and I see this with older developers where it's like if you lived through the 80s and you experienced games via arcade arcade being the primary like distribution platform of just video games in general. Before anyone owned a console or could own a console. Um, and there's something about they never let go of their quarters.
Right.
Like the way that they think about a game, or like to them, it has been cemented fully that a game is uh, a punishing set of systems designed to kill you, such that you will have to put another quarter into the machine, and you can't unlearn that. Like they're caught in that gear ostensibly forever. Um, that is what games are to them.
Yeah.
And so for those of us who grew up with games that had like save systems in them and were not fully about just killing you at every turn, such that you would have to put in an invisible quarter, uh, and in some ways like save systems sort of became their own like, you know, I'd say like ink ribbons in Resident Evil are a type of quarter,
Right.
uh, analogous to a quarter, where you're like, oh, I've only got 6 ink ribbons. Like, can I, make it through this with the limitation of, lives? Um, and it's taken a long time. Like, it's taken 20 years ish for people to unlearn that concept. So anyway, I'm just saying it's a funny thing that I encounter with older developers. I'll see their games and I'll be like, oh, okay, you still have quarters in your pocket. Like you're
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
designing things with a pack of quarters, and it's like a younger generation where that's not how they interacted with games at all. And in fact, arcade games are rather novel and foreign to them. Uh, they just don't think within those terms anymore. It's like
Right. There's even like
yeah,
plenty of people who trend away from the idea of like objective based games entirely.
right.
Of or like accomplishment based, whatever you want to like that. It is a mechanical challenge to complete a game, or that
Yeah,
the difficulty comes from one interacting
yeah,
with it.
yeah. It is funny that that became a standardized component of the medium, where it's like, uh, the whole reason it exists is to put up layers of difficulty or obfuscation in even just standing there.
Right.
Like there's so many games like for 20 odd years, they're like, you can't just stand there. If you stand there, it's over.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's kind of funny. Yeah, I'll go back whatever. I'll play something from the 80s or early 90s. And if you stand there, like literally there's some timer in the corner
Yeah.
that will tick down. And then it's like, whatever the Super Mario music kicks in, it's like, okay, like get the, hurry the fuck up, get the fuck out of here, da 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 da. Or if you play Bubble Bobble, like ghosts start spawning on the I don't know if you ever played Bubble Bobble,
Yeah.
but
I'm familiar with
uh
Bob and Bob. They blow bubbles. Waterfalls
yeah,
game.
but if you hang out too long, some fucking like phantoms
Yeah.
pop up
Right. Right.
and they start
Finish
going for you.
finish the level, buddy. We're on
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is
they're like, get the fuck out of here. Come on. Like, what are you doing?
it is very strange
It's
to
like a
think
no
of
loader time.
the idea that um, games like what I mean it should just be like a style of game rather than like the dominant like this is how games work kind of thing. Like the assumed default state of a game is a challenge, often combat based sort of game, when that realistically like within the realm of interactivity is like just like a small slice of what it could be, or
Oh
just
yeah,
like
I mean,
a style.
we've barely we've barely mapped the space of a game can what a game even is.
Right.
Just as a just as an interactive system, we don't have a long history of that. Um, and like I have a bunch of like anecdotal things that I pull up from time to time. Like games in the sense of like chess have existed for thousands of years, versions of it, but like there's old Egyptian board games,
Yeah.
um so games in that sense, in the sort of board game, chess, Go, checkers, like those sorts of games have existed forever. And so when you make a digital version of that, you're not necessarily you're not creating an entirely new thing. But when you make a game where you're ostensibly making a false world to be explored, or like to locomote through a fully synthesized space, that's a new thing, because you never could have done that. Maybe if you were some emperor and you could hire,
Right.
1,000 men to go build like an artificial place. And certainly there are like Chinese emperors and stuff that did do crazy things like this. Like there's that emperor, that story of like he made his servants build a exact scale replica of like his entire empire in miniature, and the lakes were filled with liquid mercury. Um, Apparently he died of mercury poisoning.
Oh,
Big
oh.
spoiler
Yes.
spoiler alert for that guy. I forget which emperor it was, but so it's like, unless you were exorbitantly rich, you could sort of create a synthetic space
Yeah.
to, explore. But really, it was not a thing you could ever do. So when you make a game like that, it's a brand new type of expressive medium, and we've really only been able to do that for 30, 40-ish years, depending.
Right.
Um, that's a very new thing, and so we just don't know. I mean, imagine we're only 40 years into literature.
Right.
Like
And
how
even and like even more so in terms of just like a regular, like just an average person can do it, because like the tech, like the expense of
right,
the tech hurdle is probably what, like even 10 or 20 years since just like
right.
computers became widely accessible enough that you would just assume that you would have a computer that could run a piece of game making software that just like most
Yeah,
anyone could do.
I'd say it's about yeah, I'd say it's been about 25 years since like an average person with an average computer could create a synthetic space.
Right.
And I'd argue that really began with um, id Software releasing their tools for whatever it would have been, Doom,
Yeah.
or Doom, Quake, Wolfenstein, whatever. And then subsequently, 3D Realms releasing their build engine, like Duke Nukem world building stuff. It's like it wasn't until those companies were benevolent enough to release their personal home rolled environment creation tools that just some teenage kid could install it on their boring you know system and start making artificial spaces
Yeah.
without any, not having to be like a world-class computer science. You don't actually have to be John Carmack level of programmer to go and make like a Quake 2 map. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
I think
my first game making experience was in StarCraft. Was was ha-
okay.
was hammering away
Yeah.
at their map editor, and then it had like logic loops, and like it had the kind of like
Hmm.
tools that I mean,
You could piece together some shit. You could
yeah. I
piece
mean,
together some real stuff.
I don't know if you've heard of MOBAs, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Fucking
And an entire, well, that's the thing. It's like we get the whole MOBA and the whole like Counter-Strike.
yeah,
Um,
it's all
I mean,
mod
in
scenes.
many ways, yeah, and like I mean, the entire lineage of Call of Duty owes itself to both the existence of Counter-Strike, of which I would argue it's very largely influenced by, but also the fact that the first Call of Duty was a Quake 3 mod.
Right.
Um, the very first Call of Duty was like a World War II Quake 3 thing. Um, and so again, it's like it's this weird trickle down from largely id Software allowing people to use their tools to make stuff. It's like that was such a and Blizzard, who used to also be a really badass company. I don't have any
I
I
I
don't
was
have
like,
anything good to say about them now.
I had to think for a second if they were the same company now, but they're not.
Yeah,
Wait.
no,
Oh
they're
wait.
I
Are they? Wait. Id bought Bethesda.
what do you
Microsoft bought Bethesda, right? It wasn't. Didn't Bethesda buy id, and then Microsoft bought Bethesda?
like? It's like that old like limerick, like, ate the cat that ate the wheat, like ate the rat that ate the cat that hit the dog that digged the dead. But
Uh,
like
I, I
it's too
bet.
many layers of.
Yeah.
But the fact that so you say StarCraft, for me it
Yeah.
was Warcraft 2.
Right.
What was it called? Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness, I think.
Correct. I looked at
Tides
that
of
box
Darkness.
cover a lot. I was like, oh, I could get that, but I didn't have a PC or whatever that could play it at the
Tides.
time.
Tides of Darkness.
Yeah.
So that had as a precursor to the StarCraft thing, like that had a
Yeah.
full map editor. And I remember my cousin and we would do this thing where, because that game was awesome. Like I love all the, zug, zug, zug,
Yeah. It's
like
just,
all
just
the
it's extremely
Dabu.
like it's weird to think of it like it now when there was like such a weird to think of extremely formative games in the past and like what they have like continued on to
Devolved
become.
into. Yeah, and I'd say that they're certainly in a less, I like that Warcraft 2 is this weird, scrappy RTS thing. And it had a sense of humor. Um, it was an interesting thing. It was a
Yeah.
really interesting thing. But we would do this thing where, one of us would leave the room and whatever, go make a sandwich or something. And the other, like, I would sit in the room and I would make a map, and then he would come in and play it and I'd watch him play it. And then I would leave the room and he'd make a map and then I'd come in and play it. So we would do this trade-off thing where we'd make like maps for each other to play.
Yeah.
And that level editor was so good that you could really do that, and like you could make a crappy little map in, half an hour, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Um,
I played StarCraft obsessively, and I will tell you, I maybe played like three actual like RTS. I'm gathering resource style matches online of StarCraft. They're all just like weird Dragon Ball Z games, but
that's funny.
I am also mildly obsessed with. They were also cool as hell. Like when I think back of
They were cool.
like in like the fastidiousness to like recreating like it was very bizarre. Like, so everyone, I'm gonna sit and talk about Dragon Ball Z games on StarCraft for a second. um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm pro.
so,
I
so
was also a teenager.
yeah, so
I remember. I remember.
something they would often do. You would play like DBZ Frieza Saga, and there would be different slots of like here are the characters, and like if you're slot one, you're a Goku. If you're slot two, you're Krillin or whatever. And like, let's ignore the lobby politics of I want to be Goku, I want to be Krillin, I want to be Vegeta.
Right.
Like, it
No one
would
wants to be,
right.
by the way.
What was that?
No one wants to be Krillin, but
No,
he,
Krillin.
he, he is the Krillin's got nothing.
So the extra layer of not wanting to be Krillin. Okay, if we talk into this particular version, I'm thinking of. So how it works is it's recreating the Frieza saga. So Goku like literally does nothing for like 90% of the game. Like the
Right.
Goku player is like sitting in their chamber training. That's all they're doing.
Just punching and getting all
Right.
the gravity power.
Exactly. So they are like a StarCraft ghost, and they are shooting SCVs called the Gravity Level 1 or whatever,
Okay.
to get resources to get points so that they'll upgrade to the next level of their character or whatever. While like the Krillin guy is like playing out the story, and like it's like
Right.
takes turns like that. They're super bizarre games. Like these like asynchronous
Hmm.
multiplayer kind of like they're fascinating. I one of these days I want to host a game jam that is people trying to recreate StarCraft, like those use map settings, customs maps, and people just trying to recreate them and like reinterpret those ideas into another video game.
Do those exist in a repository anywhere? Or is
At
that all
least on
just
my
like,
computer, they do. There was a repository at
oh,
some point.
you still have the Frieza Saga
Yes,
StarCraft files,
I do.
whatever they are?
At one point, I
Oh
downloaded.
shit.
Someone made a repository of all use map settings games, and I downloaded that zip file.
How big was it?
I mean, probably not that big, a couple gigs maybe.
Okay.
Uh, you
Yeah.
know,
Uh,
they're old
a
StarCraft
million
maps.
maps.
Yeah,
A million maps. 50 megabytes.
Ooh, I don't know if
Can
I
you handle it?
I don't know if I can. Can I look? Where is it? Where would I have it on my computer? I'm trying to think of where I
Okay.
would.
I mean, I'm really glad to hear that that stuff is preserved because
Yes.
I was part of the Half-Life 1 mod scene in the late 90s. And honestly, that stuff doesn't exist anywhere. Like I
Right.
remember Planet, it used to be all those Planet websites like Planet Half-Life, Planet
Yes.
Team Fortress, Planet whatever, Quake. So Planet Half-Life was like that was my homepage for years. Um, it was just the first thing that I checked every time I went on the internet, and it was very active. And it would always announce like, here's the newest mods, here's map packs, here's texture packs. Like they were just it was just an active community. And I've gone back and tried to grab you know um different mods and different like bots. Like multiplayer bots were a big thing for a while
Yeah.
because they weren't built into the game. So you'd ostensibly have to install a mod that would allow you to play bots in deathmatch. And I went back and tried to find, like Jumbot and all these like weird bots, and I couldn't find them anywhere. Like the repositories, like all the links were dead, all the websites were ghost domains, uh, all the file spaces had gone down, and it's all stuff that the Internet Archive was like not particularly good at holding on to. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I have
there's a
uh a folder called indie games, and I've peeked in there, and some of them are, as far as I can tell, do not exist on the internet anymore. Like
That's huge. That's
I could
really important that you retain that or even upload it somehow someday.
Yeah, I don't know because, like, do people want these things uploaded? The creators, the original creators, want these games uploaded still, or they're like, I'm glad that it's scrubbed. It's a weird thing, but I thought of that because I was
I
trying to
mean,
find where I put that StarCraft folder, but who knows?
I'll tell you a little I'll tell you a little anecdote
Yeah,
which might answer your question. So, maybe about 10 or 12 years ago, I got a Vectrex, if you know the Vectrex.
was
Um,
I think I do.
you know,
Is that let me look
Vectrex
at it.
is from, yeah, look it up. So a Vectrex is a
Yes, okay, I do. I've
home.
used a Vectrex.
Okay. Yeah, they're amazing when you see one, like they're magic to stare at and
Yeah,
interact with. So I got a Vectrex maybe, 10, 12 years ago. And I got one for very cheap because this full insane vintage game, price hike thing hadn't happened yet. And I got really into the idea of programming a Vectrex and like making my own, little whatever Vectrex games.
getting your own
So I was
cellophane.
what was that?
I said getting your own cellophane overlays.
Oh, well, that's the absolute last. That would be that'd be funny to go from it, from that direction first. Like, okay, I got my cellophane. What's the
Right.
game? Um, but I think they're what are they? They're like acetate. Uh, anyway, so I was trying to learn how to program this thing, and it's like 6809 assembly. It's very complicated. Um, and so I started waiting. I was trying to find resources for programming one of these things, and of course it's a super dead system. There's tiny little pockets of the internet that were interested in it, but it's the esoteric of the esoteric.
Yeah.
And so what I would find is I'd find these old Usenet forums from like the 80s where these computer science students, a lot of them like college students and um, just various types of like computer science nerds are hanging out in these Usenet forums and they're talking about, making Vectrex games. And that was the most useful, those ended up being the most useful resources. And it was only because Usenet forums have been backed up um, very well, like they've been archived very well. And in a couple of cases, I would actually find a guy on the forum, with a 20-year-old post and I'd find his email in the forum archives. I'd email him in, today or whatever it would have been 2012. And at this point, he's like married. He's been divorced. He's got kids. He's had a whole life, right? It's been
Yeah.
30 years or whatever since he wrote this. And they were so enamored and they were so fucking happy to not only know that there were still, kids in quotes out there programming and interested in the Vectrex, but that they were interested in the code that they had written 20, 30 years ago. Like they were so happy to answer questions, to talk about it, to anything. Like they were just the nicest. They were so happy to know that their stuff had lived on, because they had put all those things away. They'd put all those toys away.
You're right.
And in most cases, I don't think they even owned a Vectrex anymore. Like the Vectrex was gone from their life. So I would just say that I think in most cases, if you were to repost people's, StarCraft maps or whatever, Quake,
Or like
maps from
these
20
old
years
indie
ago,
games that I have.
yeah, I think in most cases, people are really happy to know that the thing that they were in love with at one point in their life, and probably was the thing that they ate, breathed, and slept for months, if not years. I think they'd be really heartened to know that there's actually still people out there who care.
Yeah.
Um, because there's a lot, especially with digital stuff, you never really, it's not like music. You don't get to meet your fans.
Right.
So
Right.
you don't get to ever know if you play live music long enough, at some point someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, I really loved that performance. It meant so much to me, yada yada." You don't get that with mods, or you don't
No.
get that with games in general. So the idea that someone would come up to you 20 years later and say, "You made the Dragon Ball Z Frieza Saga
Oh,
Stark," imagine if you could meet that
what if I
person.
could meet that
Uh,
person? Who
what
invented?
if you met that person?
Yeah, I met
Like
the.
it could be, you could be at a conference and someone could just say that. They're like, "By the way, 20 years ago, I made the Frieza Saga
Right.
StarCraft thing," and your monocle would pop out,
Right. I'd be you.
and
You invented the madness on StarCraft.
yeah,
The whole subgenre of. Anyway. Yeah. Jeez.
yeah.
Yeah. There is like a.
I
There's so much of it. You're
I think
right.
they'd be really heartened. They'd be really heartened to know that you not only played their little thing,
Yeah.
but that it stuck with you, like it
Right.
was formative in some capacity.
Oh yeah.
Um,
No. I'm uh, generally obsessed with like I said, that was my teen years. Like get home from school day in day out was just like playing these games like nonstop,
mhm.
and it it's like I can almost I'm looking at little screens and like I can almost identify them. I was getting into like I remember there's all the minutia of the subcultures of like you put how many exclamation points will you put in front of your game so it appears higher on the search queue. um,
Oh, because it was alphabetic.
Yeah, it was alphabetical. So you just like if you want people to play your game, if you want people to join your use map setting game, you had 8 million exclamation points, or people adding exclamation
That's
points to
hilarious.
their file. It's just so much stuff. I did
Yeah, that's
eventually
like
find that. It's 2.26 gigs for the archive master, and
oh,
there is still a GitLab up available of all these games
okay, that's
or
really
all
good
these
to know.
maps. And the final piece of bookkeeping. Um, Blizzard and id, both owned by Microsoft Game Studios.
Boo.
Both
What's
subsidiaries.
Microsoft ever done? Only
Uh,
thing Microsoft ever did that was any good was Midtown Madness.
yeah, or I don't know. I think that paperclip guy is kind of fun. A good cultural touchstone.
Clippy. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that's in an ironic sense. I'm just saying, like, I like what was it, Motocross Madness. I like Midtown Madness.
you not a big Fusion
Uh,
Frenzy fan.
what's Fusion Frenzy?
It's like a
I don't
party
know that
game, but
one.
it's for cool kids. Uh,
A party game for cool kids.
for like
What
Mario's
was
for
it on?
kids, but I'm like a trans club kid, so I'm like into. Did they actually make Fusion Frenzy? I don't remember if they actually made it. But that's
Uh,
besides the point. We're approaching. We're getting close to 2 hours. This show's got to end eventually. Uh,
oh, does it? Okay.
yes, I mean it should end
Uh,
eventually.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
No,
We
Blitz
blow our
Games
brains out.
developed it. What else did Blitz?
Oh,
Blitz Games developed a lot of stuff. I like Blitz Games made Glover. Oh, that's why they had
Glover.
that's why they probably had all that ball stuff because they had made Glover. They made the Reservoir Dogs video game,
Jesus. I just saw that the other day at the thrift store.
or they helped with it. No, no, Blitz has a bunch of different names. It seems perhaps,
Oh, I see.
but I think they did make. Yeah, let's play play some shitty PS2. How is the what is the Reservoir Dogs video game?
Oh
Truly,
God. That's
like
back when they were just purchasing light because there was like a they made a Godfather game. They
yeah,
made a what's it? Tony Montana Scarface
Scarface.
game.
Yeah.
They were trying to make a taxi driver game. It got canceled, but there's like footage of it. Um, but yeah, they were trying to take all these like old movie properties and turn them into games. I think they did an Italian Job game.
They
Um,
did. They did. I think I've played it. I think I've beaten it.
yeah, they were really hungry for just properties that they could try to convert into. I mean, they were all ostensibly GTA, but
Yeah.
uh,
Oh no,
they
not the
got hooked
Italian
on
job.
that idea.
I was thinking of what's that game? It's
Getaway,
what?
getaway.
I think so. Is that the English crime thing where you get hurt and you lean against the wall?
I never got that far because it's maybe Getaway might be one of the worst designed games I've ever encountered um, in my life. Uh, like it literally starts with an unbeatable car chase.
I
Um,
yes, yes, because Getaway Black Monday. Yes, it is the Getaway. I've mildly burned
I
through
couldn't
my
get past the
yeah.
I couldn't get past the first like it literally opens with a car chase that I could not complete.
The
It's it's
Getaway
it's
is cool. I'm pointing at to my camera to tell you all for emphasis. The Getaway is an early game that there's no UI. Like
oh, is it UI-less? It's
yeah,
like
like
it's all diegetic.
yeah, like
It's
the
all
like
done diegetically.
yeah, like like the GPS is your turd signals will activate for the GPS. So if you need
Oh,
like
interesting.
we need to make a turn like when you get shot, you just kind of get bloodier and then you lean against the wall to chill out and get your health back.
Chill out, smoke a cigarette.
Yeah, it's a fucking listen. The Getaways, the Getaway's cool. Maybe it's
If
not
you can
good.
if you can get past the first
Yes,
level, then there's probably a game, and I've never seen it. I've never
maybe
managed
I can't. I'm not gonna tell you the Getaway is good, but I'm
it.
gonna tell
Okay.
you the Getaway is cool. But
It's a game.
yeah,
I think
that's what.
it runs on the PlayStation 2. I'm pretty sure.
But to bring it all the way back, like that PS2, like that is the kind of thing that I love. Like these things that are just kind of bad or like really imperfect, but there's something. They're just taking swings at something, you know?
Yeah, I like it was scrappier. It was
Yeah.
definitely just a scrappier time. Um, I think the thing that really shifted, and I can feel this change, it happened around 2005, but
Yeah.
the requirements of the Xbox 360. Sorry, I don't know if we're in a rush now
No,
or
we
I'm
aren't.
almost
We're
hanging out.
not. We're this is
Okay.
the secret of Indiepocalypse Radio is I say we got to end this show and then he keeps going. Uh,
Okay, I see. Um, Classic. So the thing
I
that
do try to
happened
end it.
at some point, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it'll just cut off. It'll just like the feed will just go to static.
I did I'm gonna
Um,
post in the chat as well. I can put that on stream. This photo I have, I posted in so you can see it privately. Actually, no one needs to see it. You can find it. I put this in the Discord image of this guy leaning against this storage container. That's him getting his
do
health
people have
back.
questions? Do people have questions for us?
Not. So that's what I'm trying to. Perfect segue into me ending the show. So there are two questions. They weren't submitted here, but they're submitted generally. They have been. There was a legacy of them submitting them to the point where I just start asking them as essential questions. Very rarely does this show get actual questions submitted in. no matter the guest. So I always tell the guests, don't take it personally.
Okay, no, I don't take it personally.
It's like specifically, it seems like certain visual people love visual novels. It's a very passionate like subculture of games, um, and that's where I get the most questions.
Is that like dating,
Not strictly.
dating sim?
No, no, not even
What-
like strictly like dating style vision. Just like there's text on a screen, and that my main interaction with the game is interacting through text, whether it be kinetic, where there are no choices, or choice-based games where there are choices.
So like text adventure,
Uh,
ostensibly.
yeah, yeah, visual text adventure. Um, I guess some of them could be. It's like there's text with accompanying visuals.
Oh,
Imagine,
okay. So it's like
yeah,
there's like a character, you know, uh, like a character's portrait,
yes,
like saying stuff. I
and a
can't
background.
believe you
Yeah,
didn't. Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. They're very Japanese. To me, they're very
yes, yes,
Japanese.
very Japanese.
Okay.
They're,
Right, right,
they're Japanese in lineage. Back to Portopia Mystery, Mystery. What's the full name of that?
I don't know.
Portopia Mystery, uh,
That was definitely never one
Mystery
of my
Case.
genres. Like I don't
Sorry,
think I've
Portopia Murder
ever.
Case is what I'm thinking of.
Oh, okay.
Is an early
Yeah,
visual novel style game. Yuji Horii designed
definitely
it.
not one of my not one of my areas of expertise,
Yes,
clearly.
no, I'm like a sick freak who likes all sorts of stuff. So I I have like a very wide palette in terms of like most art. It's just kind of like I like to always
Right.
foot around to different things.
I
Uh,
think if an author or an artist that I already respected were to then go and make a visual novel,
right.
I would check it out because I have pre-vetted their capabilities or their voice.
Yeah.
So, for example, like I'll just pull one on my hat, but like if J.G. Ballard had made a visual novel,
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna go check out his visual novel. Like I'm like, that's interesting to me. Um, in most cases, like they're completely unknown authors. It's like I wouldn't sit down and just read a novel by an unknown author. Usually,
Yeah.
there's some vetting process in terms of how I'm gonna sit down and spend, 15 hours. If I'm gonna spend 15 hours with a book, I better know that it's like Michael Crichton or whatever, Nabokov or whatever, some author that's like has some pedigree.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
That's just how I am.
it is like it's like almost an impenetrable, or it's the fact that you can play like just visual novels, and some people probably like that is like the only kinds of games they play, and that is a healthy gaming diet. But
Oh, I'm
speaking
sure.
of questions, I'm going to ask those two questions. The first one always
Yeah. What do you got?
is, what's your favorite type of rock?
Like geological?
It's up to you. That's the extent of the information I'm going to give you related to this question.
When I hear rock, I go geological first, and then I guess music would be second. Um, Geologically, I don't know. I don't know my basalt rocks are pretty cool.
Okay.
Um, but they got overused in level design. Um, so much so that I see them in almost every game now. Like, basalt rocks, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm looking. I think they're
They
like real craggy and like a dark craggy kind of rocks, right?
they're sort of like hexagonal. They're
Okay.
weird. They're like a volcanic
Yes.
Basalt.
Yes. Yes. The kind of
Um,
yeah, the kind of like dark volcanic rocks.
yeah, but the thing that's interesting about them is they compress and form hexagonal channels. So they're anyway, they're very geometrically interesting, but every single level designer and concept artist has seized on them. So I see them in everything now, which sort of makes them less special
Right.
because they keep using them in everything. Much like fireflies are overused. I feel like fireflies are really overused in games, but in reality, they're a really magical, rare insect. But every single game is like, oh, fireflies, and they throw fireflies. And myself included, I'm guilty of that.
Yeah. Right. Well, because they're
Um,
cool.
they're cool.
Uh,
In terms of music, I don't even I don't think I listen to anything that I like metal,
yeah.
but I metal.
That I would argue metal is a type of rock. Uh oh. Have you vanished? I can't hear you anymore. You might have strayed too far. I can no longer hear you. I am typing into the chat to no longer hear you if you're speaking to me. So I'm just gonna. Oh, I gotta vamp now because I can't just end the recording. I have to fucking talk and keep talking until he comes back. I hope he comes back soon. Oh no. Try from now. See, usually when I'm just kind of here by myself. Did I? Was that okay? It wasn't just me. That was me not talking to my microphone properly. That's why I was not lighting up. Um, but but um, usually it's during the pledge drive, so I am kind of like locked into me rambling by myself for a long time. I've kind of got that mentality ready to go, but I don't have it right now. I don't have that kind of like mode, and
When,
there's not. Oh wait, yes, you're back. Hello.
when did it cut out?
About you said something about metal, and then I
Oh,
lost
and then
you.
it just went. Oh, Jesus. Okay. Can I just repeat what I said?
Yeah, no, you're allowed. Go ahead. I
Um,
didn't hear you, so
okay. I went on a whole diatribe. No, I was just gonna say that um, I don't really listen to anything that I would consider rock,
yeah,
but I listen to metal, and then from the subgenres of metal, I really like. I used to listen to a lot of stoner doom, and then presently I listen to try to find sludge
yeah.
doom. And so there's a band like if someone was curious, there's a band from I think South Carolina called Weed Eater, if you know Weed Eater.
I do know. I
Um,
believe I do know Weed Eater.
yeah, and they've got a really heavy, I mean, there's no other word for it, sludgy,
Yeah,
heavy sound, and it's got a really mean. Just really like things that have a really mean sound to them. I don't like soft, fluffy, sentimental um things usually. It's not about it being aggressive, but it's like I really like things that don't have a they're not coming from a place of like empathy or love. There's something else. Uh yeah, I don't know. I like shit that sounds really fucking dark and mean.
yeah.
That's
And I'll let you know. Weed Eater owns the covetous URL of weedmetal.com.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, those bad. I mean, they deserve it.
Yeah.
God bless those boys.
This and also this talk
God
about
bless them.
websites that look like they have not changed in 20 years. They still have a MySpace logo.
Nice.
Oh my god, these Twitter and Facebook logos are so old.
Nice.
It's like there's like a little
Good.
bird standing is their Twitter logo. News
Good.
coming soon.
Good. Yeah, I love a dead website. That's great. That's what I want to see.
But
If they had updated, what
I
do you
can
say?
still order their hot sauce.
Oh shit, they got hot sauce.
Yeah. Jalapeno hemp
Oof.
seed.
Yeah, I knew there'd be some kind of fucking
Yeah.
weed in that hot sauce. There's no way they're not doing
And the
that.
follow-up question, um,
What do you got?
this one is more optional. Oh, look at this old ass. Even this Outer Limit hot sauce has this old ass Instagram where it's like an old camera.
Like a 2010
Y-
Instagram
Yeah,
image.
where it's like the front shot of a camera.
Yeah, yeah, I know that one.
It's a fine logo.
Awesome.
Do you have a favorite Toho character?
Toho is the Japanese studio.
Not the studio. The long running Bullet Hell franchise.
Oh. Uh, I
This
mean,
one's
I
a
guess my answer would be no.
no. That's a perfectly acceptable answer. That's I think 50% of the answers is that.
It's just Toho. What game?
It's a Touhou. It's got more spice on it, but I don't know how to properly pronounce that.
Oh, Toho.
Because
Toho.
yes, because
Yeah,
Toho, as I say it with my American tongue, is that classic Japanese film production company.
yeah, Toho. So let me look up Toho because I'm just curious what they even make. Um,
It's interesting
uh,
because it's like primarily one guy, or one
is it?
guy more or less makes Toho the 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 bullet hell series, but it has like the whole like franchise.
Jesus, it's a lot of games here.
I was
Fuck.
gonna say the franchise has an open license, so basically anyone
Huh.
you can make a Toho game tomorrow and sell it on Steam, and whatever.
I
Um,
mean, so I'm looking at the entire release timeline here.
yeah. Oh, he also made a lot of games.
Uh,
They were on like the PC 98.
yeah. Oh, yeah. He's an old school dude.
Yeah.
Mathematics student, apparently. So yeah, I'm looking at his list of games here, and I'll be honest, I don't think I've heard of a single one of these. I don't like bullet. I hate bullet hells.
Well, then you're in for a
I
bad time with that. Uh,
Oh, I would hate every second. I would hate every second of probably every single. I mean, every now and then I'll put them in an old shmup just to look at the graphics. Like I think there's some really, R-Type and
yeah.
Hander, Einhander, and
Oh yeah, no, we were talking recently on the show about how yeah, bullet hells and like shooters, shmups have like a they have that kind of like shared DNA with fighting games where they have such like their storytelling is through their graphics a lot of the time.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, like much like fighting games. So they've they appeal to a very particular neurology, and there are people for whom bullet hells, I think, function as a meditative space where they lose themselves in it, and it becomes almost like a mandala or something where they enter into a flow state with
Yeah.
the thing. Um, and I'm sure if you have the type of neurology that rewards whatever that flow state is, I'm sure there's nothing better. Like I'm sure it's like the best drug for that type of neurology. I don't have that neurology, so when I brush up against it, it's completely alien and foreign to me as an experiential
Right.
thing. And I feel that with fighting games to a certain extent as well, where it's like there's people for whom doing the muscle memory for all of the moves and finding that flow state within a fighting like a whatever a Street Fighter or something. I'm sure it is absolutely a dopamine releasing reward system of which there is no equal, but I've never tasted the dopamine from either of them.
Right.
So they're completely foreign spaces, like devoid of any nutrient um, quality, which is a shame. Like I wish I could wear somebody else's shoes
Yeah.
and
Right.
play
Right.
them the way that. But I've never. It's like there's colors there for people, and I can't see those colors.
Yeah. It
It's
is.
a bit of a shame.
I mean, it's the beauty of like that's why I like games. I like the idea that can be whole subgenres. Is like I will never touch one of those in my life, uh, but it can still thrive. It's why I find the idea of kind of cramming them all together in a single thing to be very weird. Uh,
Yeah, that's the thing. I hate that we just call them games as though
yeah,
they're all this equivalent, equal thing. And it's like, no, they're really, really not just genre different, but they're like neurologically completely different. It's like they're different drugs, ostensibly.
right.
They slot into completely different receptors of people's brains. And the analogy I always use is like you could walk into a Blockbuster in the 90s and there would be like Jane Fonda's Buns of Steel workout tape and it could be sitting on the shelf next to like 2001 Space Odyssey. And it just because those two things are on VHS doesn't mean that they have anything to do with each other
Right.
uh, artistically or narratively or anything. Like they're just on the same medium of like a VHS tape, but they're a universe apart. And games often feel like that to me, where I'm like, this game is fucking Jane Fonda's Buns of Steel, and this other game is, uh, War and Peace. And why are they competing for each other at like the Game Awards or something? Like they're completely separated from each other
Right. Right.
in all facets. They just run on a PlayStation, and like that's the
Right.
only thing they
They
have in
they
common.
fall under the same vague genre of action.
Yeah, exactly. But they can be a universe apart from each other. So, um, yeah, I find that really frustrating. I think game nomenclature is still really uh, new and
Yeah.
really underdeveloped. And like, we need new words for these things because
Right.
just calling them both games is not fair.
Or we,
Um,
we need sludge of video games. We need intense micro genreing. Kind of
exactly.
because like I know what
Yeah,
I
I want the sludge.
like. What is I you see, things you can things is hard sometimes. Like you could go to Wikipedia and have them defined, but it's like you kind of understand vaguely what they mean, but they are very specific. But speaking of things that are very specific, we're ending this show. We're getting to the end of it. We're closing. I'm
Okay.
officially saying it's wrapping up.
All
I'm
right.
getting hungry, uh,
Yeah, me too.
which is when the dinner bells come a ringing for me.
you got you got a big bowl of Brussels sprouts. You gotta
No,
shine.
I only do
Chew.
that when I'm hanging out with my friends to freak them out.
Oh, okay.
They go, Andrew, what's wrong with you? I go, what do you mean? They're
I don't
great.
know. Yeah, I don't know. You got a mouthful of Brussels.
I say that, but I do actually like them. I'm not just a little troll. I do genuinely. He has them in his fridge, and I was like, these are good. I want to eat a couple of them. Anyway, I used to.
Crunch, crunch, crunch.
Right, right. There was a time where I was just, I peeled off leaves of cabbage. And I just eat a leaf of cabbage. It's good. Um, I could be a vegan very easily, is what I'm saying.
Apparently,
It's like very much, uh, lack of self control or whatever. Maybe it's just I like to eat stuff. But
you're
speaking of
eating
like,
this. Yeah, you're eating the skins, so you're getting all the nutrient
yeah,
content of those things. That's the thing.
speaking of liking to eat stuff, um, people also should enjoy a healthy diet of video games and art. Lewis, tell me about where can people find your stuff if they're looking to find it?
Um, uh, so if you type jazz punk into Google,
Yes, you got good
you
SEO.
you yeah, you should be able to, or like, yeah, jazz punk on Google. You'll get the Steam page. I think we still own jazzpunk.net, so you can grab it from there. Um, Soon, hopefully, if you type jazz punk soundtrack, like that'll be it will be, I think, jazzpunk.bandcamp.com. Like it'll be on Bandcamp, it'll be on other like Steam, it'll be on some stuff. So those that covers the jazz punk side of things. For Escote, if you're curious about my like weird industrial dark techno music project, you can, if you type Escote, Escote, on Bandcamp, you should be able to find it. And I'm on Instagram as ESCOTE ___ is whatever,
Yeah.
three underscores. Um, but if you type that in, you should be able to find me on Instagram fairly easily. And I don't know, I do play shows and I do release albums. So if you're interested in that part of my life, that's you probably get more updates on that stuff because games just take so long. Like I'm working on a game, no idea when it's going to get announced, no idea when people will see it. So if you want to keep up with me, oh, and I'm at Beetlenaut, like BeetleNaut on Twitter because I'm going to call it Twitter until the end of time. I'm
Yeah,
not acknowledging that.
for as weird
Uh,
a name it is, it's a much better name than X.
X doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Like X is what a 10-year-old boy like. names the fucking refrigerator box that he painted like a spaceship. Like it's not. Ugh. Anyway,
Well, it's a
uh,
website run by the 56-year-old equivalent of a 10-year-old boy.
yeah. So I'm on Twitter on that, and I'm fairly active on there too.
Perfect.
And when I do announce stuff, I will probably announce it on Twitter first because that's where I have the most followers. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's my advice to all the folks
Perfect.
out
Perfect.
there.
Um, oh, I forgot to put that in the. I always forget to put them in the. I forgot. If we're only one person here, so I forgot to put in the chats for people watching live.
Oh,
Um,
show notes.
oh no, I have it in the show notes, but I pasted it from my show notes into the Twitch chat. If people can click on them right now,
Oh, I see.
which is something I usually do, but I forgot to. But
Twitch.
yes, that's what was I saying? Indiepocalypse. That's me. That's me. I'm Andrew. I host. I forgot. I think I forgot to intro myself at the beginning of the show. I'm Andrew. Indiepocalypse is the thing that I do. The thing we vaguely alluded to during the show. It's a monthly anthology. I mean, how do you find yourself here if you don't know what Indiepocalypse is? I guess.
Yeah, no, who are you and how did you
Yeah.
get here?
But if that is you, Indiepocalypse, it's a monthly anthology of underground, alternative, non-studio, whatever buzzwords I'm attaching to it. It's you know it when you see it. You know it's independent games, the zines of video games, um, the mini comics, the self-taped EPs of video games. Uh, you can get those at indiepocalypse.com. Indiepocalypse.com/Patreon if you want a monthly subscription, or you want to get the newly commissioned games. If you just want to get those for like $50 a year, you can get 12 brand new commissioned games from like the best of underground devs. Uh,
Bam.
yes, indiepocalypse.com/tapes if you want to get a physical edition. I'm like proliferating physical editions of Indiepocalypse, so in the case where I eventually go down, there'll be physical copies of it floating around. The only way to survive the death of the internet is to, well, I guess there's also just digital decay, and who knows how long USB sticks survive. I mean, I use like the same shitty trade
I,
show USB stick that I got that was like
I think they're good.
from like some random metal crafter or whatever, and I used it
Yeah.
for like 10 years. So
And they're still good?
I lost it, but it was still good until I lost it.
Okay. Yeah,
And it,
losing it is the only thing.
yeah, and it was not like a
You
nice
lose
like
it, you lose it.
it wasn't like, oh, a sand disk or some high quality thing. It was like probably some shitty AliExpress thing. So
Right.
they just work, you know.
Shenzhen special.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Shenzhen stick.
Those cheap ones where you go, ooh, I can write my company logo on it and get it for $50 off of AliExpress or
Yeah. A
Alibaba.
hundred. Yeah. 50 cents a stick.
Oh
Oh,
baby. And
what a great place to archive media.
if you indie devs are interested in that, starting in 2024, I'm going to. This is me trying to say it more out loud, so it'll be. I'll have to do it. I'm gonna offer. I'm gonna be offering two options. One where I sell indie games on these sort of like indie my classic tape style
Mhm.
on your behalf, or I'll just sell them to you in bulk to sell at your local zine fairs and stuff. That's my plan.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
I want to like help proliferate the format. I think it really. I'm allowed. 2024 is where I allow myself to be confident about what I do. Um,
So is that almost like a label? Like you're setting up like a little indie USB key tape label thing?
yeah, basically, I probably won't make a logo or a name for it because I'm very branding averse. Um,
I don't know. Good
yeah,
logo goes a long way.
it does. It does. If I was better, maybe if self pub stuff. Anyway, yeah, maybe I should just make a self pub kind of thing, so people would be like, "Oh yeah, I'll get those," and they can. The collectability increases, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's name recognition, baby.
Right, and I mean, a lot of this is like my general goal is like I need how do I get a platform big enough that I can put other people on it, but I don't want the platform to be about me, shining a spotlight on myself so that I can then use a mirror to reflect onto other people. it's a delicate wire act. Um,
I mean, I think that's ostensibly what a label is.
yeah,
So the label is almost invisible, and then people
right.
recognize the music on that label. So I think you could do a similar
I
thing.
think I could. I think I
Um,
could have a fun
just
name
don't
for it.
inject your name into everything over and over
Yes,
again. You can go pretty stealth pretty quickly.
that's what I'm hoping for. That's what no one needs. You don't need Andrew's Indiepocalypse presented by Andrew, and we're not going to credit any of the developers until later on our. Who would? Because it'd be weird if like an indie dev did a project like that and put like
Yeah,
365 games every day, but only put their name on it. That'd be a really weird thing to do. Who would do that?
a Hideo Kojima game.
Yes.
Nothing
Oh,
in this game was built by Hideo Kojima.
maybe 30 years ago something was, but
Uh, I feel like no.
not even on the M. I think he had some of the hands in the scenario, maybe on the MSX.
Yeah, I still think that was represented in the form of like journal scribblings
Right.
and less. I don't think he's ever touched a code or a texture probably in his entire career,
Well,
would be my guess.
if you are touching codes and textures constantly in your career, might I suggest
Yeah,
submitting your games to indiepocalypse.com/submit? You too
do it.
can be
Do
included
it.
in this. You will, and you too can get $60 American, and then the second week you go, Andrew, aren't you supposed to pay me every week? And I go, aren't people supposed to pay me every week for this thing? Because they don't. Uh, and then you'll be like, and then you'll get $6 to $7 American every 6 months or so, maybe, give or take.
I like that you have to keep specifying the currency.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
Well,
like, these are American dollars.
Indiepocalypse is an international publication. It's developers from over 30 countries or something.
Hmm.
But
I guess
so I'm not gonna
that's
say,
fair.
okay, this is what it turns into in no, they don't have euros. This is what it is
I was about
in
to say francs. That's how I know we're both old. We're
yeah,
like francs.
uh, Canadian dollars, Brazilian real. Uh,
We call them loonies here. We
yes,
don't.
I have a couple loonies left over, I think. Uh,
Collector's item. Collector's item. Hold on to them
yes.
because they're gonna swap the queen for the king soon,
Oh
and
man, I
and we're not ready for that shit.
America keeps wondering what if we had a king. Um, I feel sometimes, but
You kind of do, yeah.
yeah, they're trying for it. But what if instead we had a million little tiny little uh, democracies or whatever? It's too big a country. Too big a country. It's a weird thing. Uh, but yes, that is to say, you will get you will get the American equivalent, and I think it's cool that people get royalties. I think it's a neat thing.
Yeah,
I've
that's
paid.
awesome.
I have paid to date. What have I paid to? I'm looking this up because I was gonna do it for some kind of announcement. Probably. Oh, because I was gonna talk about my itch sale. Indiepocalypse. Also, indiepocalypse.com/sale. Check that every now and then. If it's ever on sale, it's on sale there. Um,
Mm.
you can get all of Indiepocalypse for I think $350. Some freaks do
Whoa.
that constantly, more than I think.
Whoa. That's
Uh,
a lot of, that's more games than you can eat. That's
yes,
like a year's worth of games easily.
yeah, that is and that's the thing. Like, I am very particular about like I do even when I go on sale. I'm like I'm not technically that's the only way to buy an Indiepocalypse game for under $1 a game. Otherwise, it never dips
Right.
below $1 a game. Uh, because I am very like particular about that sort of thing. Of like things are complicated. I like that people can run big bundles and get money, but also
Mhm.
when you're selling 130 games for or like 600 games for $50, that kind of like makes it harder for a person to then sell one game for five, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, it devalues people's work. You don't want to get to a point where it's not a race to
Right.
the bottom where they're like, each indie game is 1 cent, like,
Yeah.
which is the Spotify model of you don't want to be fractioning things down to the point where you're like, oh, cool, my Spotify song got 1 million listens and I got 50 cents out of it. Like it completely devalues the work that people put into their stuff.
Yeah, and then but there's also this like, you know, horrible mentality of like, would does your average itch dev make any money if not for those massive 300 game bundles? You know,
Right.
I've had a lot of people tell me Indiepocalypse was the first time and most time they've been paid for a game. And I don't know if you're listening, eagle-eared listeners will hear earlier. I say you get paid roughly $60, uh, which is not a lot of
Yeah.
money.
No, it's really sad that there's people out there killing themselves. And I would argue one of the hardest expressive forms that exists. And they don't make anything from it. I think that sucks.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really hard. It's really hard to make even the most simple game. And
right.
so
And
people
and that,
need, yeah, people need money from it.
and that's how. It's, if we talked about earlier, we're not going to get back into hey, look at the games that
Oh
make
yeah,
money.
yeah.
Only some people who have money make games, so the games that make money, and then only certain types of games get made, etc., etc. The giant.
It's a whole dependency stack.
Yeah,
It's pretty wild.
but I looked up the number. That number is 26,853 and 66 cents of Indiepocalypse paid royalties paid out in these last 4 years. Uh,
Damn.
um, that is a lot of money paid out to devs. So yeah, small pub. There's something to it, folks. There's something to self pub, small press kind of stuff. I think there's like there's a lot in games to do that. You just got to stop. If you're even thinking about the Game Awards, you need to save your soul. It's they are unrelated to what you do as a game developer. Uh, I, I I think that the kind of like the games, the online game culture that you see through your Game Awards, your IGN and GameSpots, those represent the commercial space represents a but a small narrow fraction of what games that are being made as an art form. But we let it dominate the majority of the cultural space. But you can just stop playing them, or like not exclusively. Before this, I was playing Yakuza. After this, I'm going to continue playing Yakuza. Uh,
But it's the thing of imagine if the only music you ever listened to
yeah.
was what happens at the Grammys.
Yes.
It's like how narrow would your understanding of music as a medium be if
Right.
you only listen to stuff that was on the Grammys? Like how horrific is that?
Yes. Right. Exactly. And that
Conceptually.
I've come to like this kind of thing, like seeking a canon is folly, and I don't care what people like. Like I'm more interested in just people having a diverse diet of art, you know.
Hmm.
But I've like maybe also because I'm old and tired. Old, I say in my 30s.
Yeah, yeah. You're not old.
But this kind of like I don't care if I'm no longer the type of person who's like, oh, I can't believe you haven't watched, listened to, played XYZ.
Right.
My version of that is I can't believe you only play 3 games. You only play the 5 games that spend a lot of money on advertising. Uh,
Yeah,
just
it's really weird.
Yeah, I mean, and culturally, you find that how many pieces of art are driven by advertising dollars, because as the relevance of advertising goes away, so does the relevance of that art, as it turns out.
Yeah. Yeah, it is
It's
funny when you stop pushing for those things. It's like the audience sort of evaporates.
right. You
Uh,
quickly realize that how often the top grossing stuff does not translate into like even just like best of lists, you know.
mhm. Yeah, it's just whatever had the most billboards
Right.
around all the major cities
You
and
could
the most
you could even go
okay.
like it's like the most mainstream some of the most mainstream examples. You could just like, you know, I bet if you fired up, you know, Pitchfork's top 190 albums, they would not align with the top 100 Billboard 90 albums, you know.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely.
But apparently, anyway, this is a whole other conversation. We're gonna end this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Luis, thanks for joining
Well,
me here today. Thanks for hanging out
I,
for 2.5 hours as we do this show. Uh,
no worries. Thanks for having me.
no,
Glad to
it's
talk.
this is my way that I make myself hang out with people. But I love doing it.
It's smart.
It's a great way. It's a great excuse to uh, burn a portion of a Saturday, uh, and have you back on another point where we have other guests we can hang out with, because that's the other fun part is like getting a bunch of people in a room together, that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford GDC tickets or whatever. Or
Yeah, I think the utility of that is like pretty cool. So yeah, definitely have me on again in the future. I'd be happy to participate in a
yeah, I'm
bizarre roundtable with others.
yes, devs from around the world is my goal. Sometimes we have people from you know different corners of the earth that like would definitely never like even just like different corners of the U.S. How often people are going to meet? But anyway,
Guam.
Guam. Yes, we have a dev. We
Yeah.
have Guam. Guam is on the map.
Is it really?
Yes.
Awesome.
I don't know if that dev lives in Guam or is simply from Guam, but they're like put Guam on the map for me,
Yeah.
and so it's there. Yeah, no, all over the place. Uh, turns out you can make games outside of North America or Europe. Uh, weird, but it's true.
I don't know if that's true,
It's
but
true. I've got
I'll take your word for it. But I
I
don't
made
know.
I made a whole list of games just made in South America, and
Wow.
those were only five of many uh, games.
Is one of them Xenoclash?
No, no, this is just within Indiepocalypse. This isn't even the entirety of video
Oh.
games.
Oh, okay. All right. I dig it.
Yeah,
I like it.
that is just within Indiepocalypse. Yeah, no, there is an infinite supply. I just added one the other day from Chile, a dev to the map. I think my last dev I added to the map was from Chile. So
Cool.
ever expanding. Uh, but that's it. I'm ending the show now. Goodbye, everyone.